Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. Pirates of the Navy Thunder God. Chapter 1, Sky Island Bika. This is a magical land. The clouds are at eye level, and the azure sky seems to be within reach. What you step on is not soil, but snow-white clouds. The warm breeze blows on your face, bringing a suitable coolness. Coconut trees with strange shapes stand on the white beach, and several flat fish rush out from the white clouds, sprinkling strings of water droplets. The residents with happy smiles on their faces and wings behind them, like angels, work hard in the small town, saying hasuo to everyone they meet. Apart from constantly challenging his limits, Ron's only remaining hobby was watching anime, so it only took him 3 minutes to sort out the current situation. He crossed. The reason is unknown. This is the world of One Piece, Sky Island. Then. I told you it was all a misunderstanding. Why should I be executed, you bastard? Da-da-da. In the not-so-bustling town, a figure was running away in panic, followed by several soldiers in strange costumes holding spears. Ron knocked over the street vendors, pushed aside the passers-by who were blocking his way, and rushed forward with his head down. Ah! There are people from Qinghai. Stop! Don't run if you dare! Hurry up! Catch him and you'll be rewarded handsomely. For a while, the streets were filled with exclamations and chaos, it was so lively. Ron was helpless about the group of soldiers behind him who wanted to capture and execute him. If you want to travel through time, then go ahead and travel. There are hundreds of time travelers appearing on Earth every day. The army of time travelers has already occupied the multiverse. One more or one less won't make much difference. But after crossing, he landed directly from the air. Who can bear this? He was just an ordinary person, falling headfirst from a height of 5 meters, with his spine being the bearing force. If he didn't die, he would be crippled. The good news is that Ron didn't die after falling headfirst, but the bad news is, he fell on a fat man who was dressed gorgeously, had a group of guards, and looked like he was not someone to be trifled with. Ron, a big man weighing 90 kilograms, fell from a height of 5 meters. Under the acceleration of gravity, he collided head-to-head with the fat man. After a doon sound, Ron felt dizzy and dazed due to his special physique. The fat man laughed like a fool and fell to the ground with a plop. The blood quickly dyed the white ground red and he stopped breathing after a few seconds. It's not like he hasn't killed people before. When he caught poachers poaching, he was forced to kill 5 of them in 3 days. When he found the treasure in the rainforest, he killed the rest and kept it all for himself, even though it was someone else who started it first. But who could have imagined that he would be killed by himself falling from the sky? This experience is truly novel. Moreover, in front of so many people. Looking at the stunned guards around him, Ron scratched the back of his head and smiled awkwardly. Do you believe me if I say I didn't mean it? He killed Lord Cisco. Catch him. Capture the Qinghai assassin and eliminate him with the Yunfuliu. Ron knew what the cloud floating flow mentioned by these Sky Island people with white chicken wings was. It was a unique form of execution on Sky Island. The prisoner would be placed on a small island cloud and allowed to float in the sky. There was nothing to grab around him, and he was 10,000 meters in the air, unable to reach the shore. In the end, he would starve to death or die of thirst. It was similar to the sea punishment used by coastal countries and pirates in the Middle Ages, where the prisoners were exiled to the sea. No, listen to my explanation. Are you serious? He wanted to explain himself, but an arrow flew past his ear and made Ron realize that reason was no longer effective and the only thing he had to do was run. A chase thus began, and Ron fled madly, relying on his strong physique gained from constantly challenging his limits. The Sky Island was barren and sparsely populated. They soon passed through the small town and entered the white cloud area. The soldiers were no longer afraid of missing the target and they all drew their bows and fired at the target. Call out! Call out! Arrows flew one after another, the sound of breaking through the air was sharp and piercing. Ron was terrified and kept moving like a snake. Luckily he was not hit. Who, I can't take it anymore. Not enough oxygen, I'm so tired. Ron ran breathlessly, his vision began to blur, and every time he lifted his foot, it felt like stepping into a quagmire. In the world of One Piece, the naturally formed Sky Island is at least 5,000 meters above sea level, and the oxygen concentration is shockingly low. If an ordinary person suddenly comes to this altitude from an altitude around sea level, even if he does not experience altitude sickness, the continuous running will cause symptoms such as brain hypoxia and difficulty breathing due to the insufficient oxygen carrying capacity of red blood cells. If Ron had not been to Tibet frequently in the past and had climbed Mount Everest once, his body would have adapted to the environment. In addition, his physical fitness was already there, and he would have collapsed halfway. This is running on Mount Everest. Regardless of whether the conditions allow running, if you don't carry an oxygen tank at that location, you will die. However, the people of Sky Island were already familiar with the oxygen concentration here. In this harsh environment, even if they did not exercise, their bodies would be much stronger than those of Earthlings after they grew up. When Ron was about to fall due to lack of oxygen, the pursuers behind him were full of energy. Oh no! There's a shrine ahead. Stop him! We can't let Qinghai people enter the shrine. Suddenly, the soldiers behind him shouted and woke up the semi-conscious Ron. He forced himself to open his eyes and saw a building that looked more like an altar than a shrine at the end of the road. Hey, what is that? Human! Ron exclaimed softly, and through the short wall, he noticed a figure sitting on the ground in the corner of the shrine, with his hands on his knees and his head buried between his knees. And unlike the Sky Island man chasing him, this person, like him, has no wings behind him. Finally I see my own kind, brother, help me! Ron exclaimed in surprise. Diverting trouble away is always the only way to escape. It's not that Ron can't die on Sky Island, but he doesn't want to die at the hands of a bunch of trash. This is an insult to his previous persistence. The sudden shout frightened the man and he looked up in panic. He seemed to have fallen asleep and was still a little dazed when he opened his eyes. However, when he noticed the Sky Islander behind him, he immediately jumped up. No! It wasn't me, I didn't mean to. Seeing this, Ron suddenly had a bad feeling. He wanted to divert the blame, but this person seemed to be a coward. Besides, he looked very friendly. Even with his big afro, he looked a little different from what he remembered. The next second, the soldier behind him roared angrily. Enelu! You bastard again! Get out of this shrine, you freak! Desecrating a shrine! Unforgivable! We can't let him off this time. Punish him with Yunfo Lu! Sizzle sizzle! Ron stepped on the brakes with his heel, leaving a trail of dust, and stopped in front of the afro with a confused look on his face. Wait! You're Enelu! The man with the afro looks to be about the same age as himself, at most 1 or 2 years older. His earlobes are long enough to pull down to his chest. Judging from his appearance, he is indeed the Sky Island god, Enelu, who appeared in the original work. However, compared with the arrogant and domineering Thor who would treat human lives as worthless in the future, Enel at this moment was timid and looked weak. When he heard that the soldiers were going to punish him with Yunfa Flow, he was so scared that tears and snot were about to come out, and he didn't even hear what Ron asked. But at this time Ron didn't care about Enel's rude behavior. A gleam of light flashed in his eyes and the corners of his mouth slowly cracked. This is Bika. It seems that the time is long before the original story, when Enelu had not yet obtained the thunder fruit. In other words, snapped. He grabbed Enel's long earlobe, and Enel cried out in pain without warning. Ron pulled him in front of him, and he looked at him with fear and confusion on his face. Seeing this, Ron smiled slightly. Enelu, right? Let me ask you, Do you know what kind of strange fruit is here? Fruit, fruit. A tired but ferocious expression appeared on Ron's face. Adrenaline was rapidly secreted, and his rapidly beating heart and lack of oxygen made him look red-faced, like a devil. That kind of naked malice and greed was something Enelo had never seen in his life. The snow-white teeth exuded a chilling coldness like white bones. Ron pulled him closer, and the air from his mouth hit Enel's face directly. The broken alveoli under strong pressure made the breath full of blood. His voice was a little trembling. Ah! That's right. It has spiral lightning patterns. You will feel an electric shock when you get close. It's a fist-sized fruit. Have you seen it? Chapter 2 Temple Thunder Fruit. The fruit has spiral lightning patterns, and you'll feel an electric shock when you get close to it. The fist-sized fruit is the legendary Thunder Fruit. Devil Fruit is a magical product unique to the world of One Piece, divided into 3 types: superhuman, animal, and natural. The Thunder Fruit is a natural devil fruit, meaning thunder and lightning in the sky, and in Ron's heart, the Thunder Fruit is the most perfect fruit in the world of One Piece. In terms of speed, it can teleport in an electromagnetic field, comparable to the piercing fruit of the Admiral of the Navy, Yellow Monkey Borsalino. Although the latter claims to be the speed of light, he certainly cannot reach the speed of light, which is a situation that the physical universe will never allow to occur. You must know that at the speed of light, the mass of an object will become infinite. If moving at the speed of light, without considering other factors such as burning and wear, the impact of a user with the power of the Pika Pika no Mi fruit launching himself could easily destroy a continent or even smash a planet. If Kizaru is that strong, there would be no point in playing pirates. He can overthrow the world government with one hand. In terms of attack, the power of thunder is no weaker than any other ability. In the face of terrifying high temperature and flexible electromagnetic application, whether it is Whitebeard's tremor fruit that destroys the world, or Shanks' domineering Hawkeye slash and anything else, it is the same. As for weaknesses, electric current is affected by electron transitions, and there are many ways to interfere with it on Earth. However, in the world of One Piece, except for the user of the Gum fruit who can directly offset it with the fruit's ability, the Thunder Fruit has almost no nemesis. Ordinary rubber can be easily burned by the heat generated by lightning, so it is not a weakness at all. At most, it is like liquid to the sand fruit, allowing people to touch the entity of the Thunder Fruit ability through rubber. In the original work, Enelo is the user of the Thunder Fruit. Even though he was defeated by Luffy, he was still designated by Oda as having a 500 million bounty. Even in the New World, he is still the strongest among the strong. This shows how terrifying the Thunder Fruit is. Enel's loss was so funny and frustrating that Ron cursed him as a waste. So Ron had fantasized more than once before, if he could obtain the Thunder Fruit, how would he use it to defeat Luffy, who was naturally resistant to the Thunder Fruit? Very simple. Don't rely on the power of the fruit, just strengthen your body madly like he did in the past. With absolute speed and strength, he crushed Luffy head-on. So after coming to the One Piece world and cleverly appearing on Sky Island, Ron's first reaction was to look for the legendary fruit. However, since he could not determine the current time and place before, this was just an idea. However, after discovering Enelu, this thought immediately turned into an opportunity, and into the purest greed. He wants to get this fruit. No excuse. No reason. Anyone who dares to stand in his way is his mortal enemy. Because he has no wings, Enelu is bullied in Becca. Today he was beaten up again, called a freak and an alien, and had to flee to the Forbidden Shrine for refuge. But, that was just bullying, no killing intention. Ron's naked malice was something he had never seen before. He felt that the man in front of him was not a human being, but a beast that would choose its prey. A beast that captures its prey and does not allow any creature to get close, guarding its food. Squeak! There was a sound of running water and a foul odor. Ron looked down and saw that the inside of Enel's trouser legs had darkened in color and drops of liquid were flowing down his trouser legs and dripping onto the ground. The future Thor Enel was so scared by Ron that he peed his pants. Tisk, you are such a useless piece of trash. Frowning, Ron used his hands to pull Enel's earlobe until his knuckles turned white. There were even bloodstains on the edge of the oracle, and Enel struggled madly in pain. If this continues, Ron will tear his ears off. The human physique in the One Piece world is generally strong, and the special environment of Sky Island is an excellent place to build a strong body. So even the skinny Enel has strength that is not inferior to Ron's tempered body, and his arms are sore from struggling. However, Ron was like an iron statue, holding Enel tightly no matter how he struggled. He wrapped the earlobe around his hand, brought Enel closer to him, and said again face to face, I don't want to say the same thing for the third time, have you seen that fruit? Ian in the temple. With tears and snot all over his face, Enel covered his ears in pain and screamed, I've seen the fruit you mentioned. It's in the hands of the statue. The temple at the entrance of Ani Road is the only house in this shrine. There is no soil, no trees, no stones on the Sky Island. All buildings and roads are made of island clouds. On the side of the two people, there is a house with eaves made of island clouds and painted with an unknown red pigment. There are strange murals carved on the walls. The people in the murals have huge wings and bird-like mouths, flying in the thunder. Is it right inside? Ron's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He threw Enel aside and rushed forward. Noticing his actions, the soldiers outside the shrine became anxious. Oh no! He's going into the temple. Where is the servant of God? Call him over quickly. The servants of God are out on patrol. They won't be back until the afternoon. The shrine is a holy place for all the Baika people. Its status is like the golden city of the Shandayan people, Shandora, and the holy land of the celestial dragons, Marijoa. Without permission, they dare not step into it at all, or the king will chop off their heads. Only priests and servants can enter to clean and worship the gods after bathing and changing clothes. Ignoring the crying Enel and the cursing Sky Island soldiers behind him, Ron kicked the door open with a bang and glanced at the layout inside, and his eyes couldn't turn away. Found it! The temple enshrines a statue that looks like a bird and a human, made entirely of gold, with 3 heads and 6 arms, holding a golden fork, Buddhist beads, and a golden halberd. In front of the statue, there is a table covered with a red cloth, with a golden furnace tripod on each side, and offerings placed on a golden circle in the middle. However, Ron's attention was not on the huge amount of gold, but on the palm of the statue's hand, which was naturally flat as it sat cross-legged. A round sky-blue fruit was placed there, and the delicate spiral lightning patterns flashed with lightning from time to time. As the light moved, the golden statue emitted an awe-inspiring luster, which was extremely majestic. That fruit was the devil fruit he had always dreamed of. Thunder fruit. The power of nature, here I come. Ron rushed over excitedly, stepped on the tribute table, and stretched out his hand. At this moment, a sigh echoed in the empty temple. You blasphemer, step back! Bang! In contrast to the sigh, a terrible sonic boom appeared instantly, deafening. Ron's finger was only 3 centimeters away from the thunder fruit, and he was about to get it. He even felt the numbness brought by the electric current, but at this time an extremely powerful impact hit his waist and knocked him away. Puff! Ron vomited a pool of blood in midair and flew backwards without any resistance. He hit the wall heavily and stayed there for a second before falling down. He curled up in pain and hit the ground with his head. This is a power he has never felt before. In the past, when he fought with others, he would only feel pain in one place after being hit by a punch, a kick, or a bullet. But this time, his bones all over his body were crunching, making his eyes wide open, cold sweat pouring down his forehead and saliva and blood dripping uncontrollably from the corners of his mouth. The gods left a prophecy that this fruit will bring great power, but it will also bring irreparable disasters. An old man in a grey robe, with a shiny forehead and chicken wings on his back, walked out from the corner step by step, his expression neither sad nor happy. He was not angry about Ron's offense, nor was he happy that his attack was effective. He was as calm as water and as steady as an old dog. As he spoke, the old man walked to Ron, who was curled up on the ground, and raised his palm towards Ron. In his palm, a scarlet shell was tied with a rope, and the impact just now was launched from it. This is one of Sky Island's specialties, the impact shell. It can absorb external impacts into the shell and launch them when needed by pressing a switch. It is amazing. Judging from the fact that the soldiers outside did not dare to approach, the status of the shrine was extraordinary. The old man was able to hold a shock shell in the shrine, so his status was unquestionable. Correspondingly, the shock shell he used must be of the best quality among the best quality, and the impact power it could launch was even more powerful than that of ordinary shock shells. The fact that Ron was not killed directly by the impact was already proof that his physique was different from that of ordinary people. The fact that you can come here and aim directly at that fruit proves that you know exactly what it is. But it doesn't belong to you, Qinghai people. So. Bang bang bang. As the old man was talking, Ron suddenly sneered. The laughter was crazy and joyful, which gave the old man a bad feeling. His calm face suddenly changed and he frowned and shouted. Why are you laughing? I'm laughing at what you said, old man. Ron raised his head, blood on the corner of his mouth, and spat out bloody phlegm. That fruit you just mentioned? Is it? This one? Boom, 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 boom. As he spoke, he loosened his grip and a sky-blue fruit fell to the ground, rolling all the way to the old man's feet. There was an obvious tooth mark on the fruit, and there was a trace of blood in the flesh. Not good. Suddenly, the old man's pupils suddenly contracted and he looked back. The statue was still sitting cross-legged, looking natural, but the thunder fruit in its palm had disappeared. Chapter 3, The impact is as powerful as thunder. Just like you should never trust the health of Noxians, don't blindly trust your eyes. There was less than a second between the time the old man made the first sound and the time he used the shock shell to launch the attack. But it was that less than a second that gave Ron enough time to make some small moves. He exerted force on his toes and tapped the tribute platform hard, and the force exploded out. He was already floating in the air, and his feet were no longer under force, but because the acceleration was not fast, it could not be seen from the side. When the impact hit him, his palm had actually blocked the thunder fruit. Then, the displacement caused by the impact made him slap the thunder fruit away, and with the help of the violent airflow, the ribbons in the temple were stirred, and sand and rocks flew everywhere, but the old man did not notice this. Then Ron grabbed the thunder fruit in his arms, supported his body with his forehead and knees, and curled up on the ground. Not only was he unable to move because of the pain, but he also wanted to protect the fragile thunder fruit in his arms. After all, the devil fruit can remain intact before being eaten, but it is just an ordinary fruit. A slightly larger impact can crush it and make it lose its effectiveness. But that's all in the past. Ugh! This shit-like smell. I will remember it for the rest of my life. Sizzle, crackle. The sense of crisis suddenly rising behind him made the old man terrified, and he turned around quickly. However, the expected attack did not appear. He saw Ron standing up with unsteady steps, his body swaying, and it was obvious that he was seriously injured. But at the same time, blue electric currents flowed through his body, making a crackling sound. The invisible aura rushed towards him, and the tingling sensation on his face made the old man look solemn. The ribbons in the entire temple moved automatically without wind, violating the laws of physics and ignoring gravity, floating towards Ron, just like the believers who met their faith and wanted to see the holy face. Feeling the surging power of thunder in his body, something he had never possessed before, made Ron feel very novel. Is this the power of a devil fruit? It's really unique. ZZ. With a thought, an electric current flashed between his index finger and thumb, making a crackling sound. Even though it was just a tiny bit of lightning, Ron smelled a foul odor. That is the smell of ozone that is emitted when the oxygen in the air is decomposed by electric current. I don't know what effect this power has on humans. As he spoke, Ron raised his head, his eyes cold and ruthless, meeting the old man's. No. Impossible. Do you know what you've done? At this moment, the old man looked crazy, no longer as calm as before. As one of the generations who have guarded the secret, Ron's behavior today has turned the efforts of several generations into nothing and completely negated the meaning of his existence. The older, the more conservative, the more determined. But when this will collapses, it brings about a complete spiritual collapse. What did you do? It's none of my business. Ignoring the old man's expression, Ron tilted his head, a hint of amusement, and bloodthirstiness appearing at the corner of his mouth. A wounded beast is the most dangerous. When injured, Ron's killing intent was the strongest. On Earth, there are moral laws and weapons that he cannot resist, but in this world. How about, you tell me? Hateful. Seeing this, the old man raised his hand, pointed his palm at Ron, and roared ferociously, "Die, bastard!" Invisible chi energy was wrapped around the shell in the old man's hand, and the terrifying fluctuations were frightening. The shock stored in the shock shell could be fired in batches. If too much was fired at a time, the recoil would be no weaker than the legendary repelling shell. He had only used a little of it against Ron before, but this time, he was going to use it all. Kaka. The strong force caused dense cracks to appear on the shell, and the air was buzzing. After this use, the shell was scrapped. But if he could kill Ron, the old man thought it was all worth it. When the impact was concentrated to the extreme, the old man shouted, pushed his palm, and pressed the switch. Impact shell, max. Fire. The air seemed to freeze for a second, and the next moment. Boom! The terrifying impact burst out, and the air column formed was several meters thick. In a straight line, the debris disappeared instantly, and it became extremely empty in the blink of an eye. The solid wall did not block the impact for a second, and a big hole was punched through in an instant. Outside the shrine, the Sky Island soldiers who had not yet dispersed were startled by the loud noise. The impact filled with the breath of death was chilling. When they turned around, they saw the walls of the temple suddenly exploded, and the smoke and dust covered the sky, like a yellow dragon hitting the sun. This is impact shell. What is the priest doing? Why are you using something like this in the temple? The temple is sacred, and no one is allowed to enter it, let alone bring weapons or even a killer weapon like the shock shell. As a Qinghai native, Ron couldn't possibly have the controlled weapons that Bai Ka strictly guarded, so only the priests could use the shock shell. Enlil was even more stunned, and suddenly his body trembled as he thought of a terrible possibility. At this moment, a cry of surprise attracted their attention. "Captain, Captain, look over there!" The middle-aged captain turned around, stunned for a moment, and sat down with weak hands and feet. That was also used to attack Bagan. In the distant clouds, a cylindrical passage that stretched for hundreds of meters pierced through the clouds and appeared in the sky, clearly visible. Wherever it passed, everything disappeared and was crushed into dust by the impact, forming a hollow passage. Hiss! A group of people took a deep breath in unison, staring into the distance in horror, unable to speak for a long time. Such a powerful impact was incredible even in their eyes. After a long while, someone hesitantly said, "Under this kind of attack, the Qinghai man should be dead, right?" And many more. "That's right. The priest must have launched the attack to deal with the Qinghai criminal. Such a terrifying impact is no weaker than the legendary Pai Ji Bei." The Qinghai man must have been smashed to pieces under the impact. Immediately, they turned their attention back to the temple, wanting to know the result. Especially Enelu, who looked over eagerly with a cruel smile on his face. Only sizzle, sizzle. Behind the smoke and dust, a crisp sound of electric current was heard, and a human figure was vaguely revealed. What? Boom! Along with earth-shattering screams, wisps of green smoke floated in the air, and surging electric currents came down from the sky like a torrential rain, capable of shattering rocks and cracking the earth with one strike. Is this thunder? What on earth happened? The soldiers' breathing became heavier and they stared at the darkening sky in horror. The thunder that fell from the sky did not cover a large area, but only enveloped the shrine. A thunderbolt struck at the feet of Enel, causing him to shudder in an instant. He covered his bleeding ear and fled in panic, running directly in front of the soldiers. But the soldiers who had previously shouted at him to kill him for entering the shrine no longer cared about him. They all stared in amazement at the temple covered by thunder, losing the ability to speak. The dark clouded sky, the strange thunder and lightning, and the screams of the priests were like the end of the world, which was terrifying. God, the gods must be angry. Run! Thor is angry. Suddenly waking up, the soldiers were terrified. Baika has worshipped the thunder god for generations, and this scene is exactly the same as what the priest said about the angry thunder god. Chapter 4, Is the test fruit poisonous? Ron had no idea what was happening outside. In the temple, he only had one hand left, stuck on the old man's neck, and the rest of his body had disappeared. The turbulent lightning outside was caused by the power that overflowed from his body after his body was broken apart and he could not control it. But soon, this strange phenomenon disappeared, and strands of electric current intertwined and weaved, thunder flashed, outlining Ron's appearance, and the overflowing lightning returned to the main body and regrouped into a human. Except for one place, no trace of thunder could be seen anywhere else. ZZ. Ah! The arm that turned into thunder burst out with strong electric current again. The old man opened his mouth wide, his whole body twitched uncontrollably, and his skin emitted a burnt smell. As the tester of Ron's first use of strength, he was undoubtedly qualified as he was able to survive for so long. Ron rubbed the stubble on his chin with his bare hands and thought slowly. No wonder the nature system was called an invincible ability in the early stages. Their elementalization is actually a passive skill. However, it is also controlled by the ability user and can contact entities at will. In addition, after being dispersed in a large area, if you cannot control the release of your abilities before regrouping, your physical strength will also be consumed. After all, regrouping itself is also a process of using the power of the fruit, so even if you have elementalization, you still can't take it lightly. After obtaining the thunder fruit, Ron had plenty of time to dodge before the impact arrived. Even if he didn't learn Enel's trick of teleporting in the electromagnetic field, the speed of lightning itself should not be underestimated. He just wanted to test the question he had always been curious about and collect data for the future development of the fruit ability. Only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win every battle. As a time traveler, Ron has achieved knowing the enemy, but as a new fruit ability user, he has not yet achieved knowing himself. Tsitsizi. The current in his hand increased again, and the unconscious old man with foam at the mouth could only scream passively, without any power to resist. Ron had another new gain. The power of the fruit is not only related to the degree of development, but also to the strength of the user. I just obtained the thunder fruit, and the degree of development is about 0, so the power of lightning is only linked to the current physical strength. At present, 50% of my strength is not enough to kill this person. After all, this is Superman, who only had one hand broken after using such a large-scale impact. Ordinary people can only withstand 10% of my strength at most. Although the impact shell is not as good as the legendary repulsion shell, its recoil is still very terrifying, which is why it is listed as a controlled weapon by Bika. While it has enormous destructive power, if an ordinary person uses it once, his bones and muscles will be broken and he will be disabled for life. The fact that the old man only lost one arm after the max launch is enough to show his strength. Only 1/10 of its power. Ron sighed. It seems that even if we want to catch up with Enelu in the original novel, we still have a long way to go, let alone dominate the world. There are countless monsters in the world of One Piece. The forces that are generally fatal to Earthlings are only the standard of the Four Seas and even the East China Sea. The gap between the East China Sea and the top of the world is self-evident. Crunch! He loosened his grip and released the old man who had turned into charcoal. As his fingers loosened, the body that had been roasted to a crisp by the lightning with full force shattered directly and turned into a pile of black dust. Max launch? I thought the girl from the Hanakin family had walked into the wrong house. Ron pouted his lips in disdain and dusted off his hands. This action caused his wounds, which were healing rapidly, to stumble. Ron frowned slightly and looked out the door. Tisk, you guys are really fast. After seeing the strange thunder, the soldiers of Sky Island who believed in Thor thought that Thor was angry and fled in panic, dropping their weapons. Now that Ron was free, he had disappeared. He was unfamiliar with this world. Unless he waited for his wounds to heal and then wasted time killing all the guards, who knew who was who. As for why it is a waste of time. Goo! Low thunder echoed over the ruins. This is not from the thunder fruit, it's just from the stomach. Ron's eyes turned green with hunger after not eating for a day, coupled with the huge amount of exercise and the energy needed to heal his injuries. Starving! Glancing around the temple, Ron saw the thumb-sized purple fruit on the altar looked fresh and delicious. With an empty stomach, he didn't care what it was and poured it into his mouth from the golden plate. It tastes good, sour. He quickly stuffed a bunch of fruits into his stomach, and the full state helped the body heal faster. Some of the broken wounds were emitting green smoke, and the cracked skin began to gather together at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few breaths, the injuries on the surface of the skin had healed, leaving only the serious injuries of broken bones and tendons. But judging from the current progress, a severe fracture that would take an ordinary person 3 to 4 months to heal would only take Ron a week. It is dozens of times that of ordinary people. This kind of recovery ability is the reason why Ron dares to risk his life. As long as the person doesn't die on the spot, even the most serious injuries can be healed. The only thing that cannot be cured by itself is the teratogenic disease caused by the body itself. That's another question. The stomach takes away a lot of blood when digesting food, the oxygen supply to the brain decreases, and the tense nerves gradually relax. Ron sighed comfortably and thought about his next schedule. After eating and drinking, what should we do next? Stay on Sky Island and be the only one who can defeat the enemy? With the invincible power of the Thunder Fruit, can he follow Enel's example and rule Pika and even the entire Sky Island? This idea was too naive and did not fit Ron's personality. As a madman who constantly challenged himself, Ron could not accept the idea of living a life of idleness and waiting for death while being served by others. That's right. Let's go to Qinghai. Ron's eyes lit up. Sky Island was just a corner of the One Piece world that was so small that it couldn't be any smaller. The entire Bika Kingdom was even smaller than some second-tier cities on Earth. Only the vast Qinghai, the turbulent and racing Great Pirate era, could arouse Ron's interest a little. But, how do we leave Sky Island and return to Qinghai? Looking through the hole in the temple at the distant clouds, Ron scowled. The idea was set, but technical problems remained. The Sky Island is at least 5,000 meters above sea level, and ordinary people can't get down from there. As a naturalist, Ron can ignore all physical damage and jump down directly, but he is afraid that there is sea water below, and he will be drowned instead of falling to death. Enel has no wings, and he may be from Qinghai. Maybe he knows some solution. Looking up, Ron's body changed rapidly, and in a flash of lightning, he disappeared on the spot. Outside the high wall of the shrine, Enel hugged his knees and leaned against the wall, trembling. He was obviously frightened by the thunder. At this time, the air was filled with the sound of crackling electricity, weaving into a human shape. A small lightning bolt hit Enel's arm, causing him to stand up in pain and stare at Ron in amazement. This is not teleportation, but just the movement speed of the user after the thunder fruit has been elementalized. However, in the eyes of ordinary people, it is no different from teleportation. Ron, with a human upper body and lightning lower body, had a blank expression on his face and spoke calmly. "I'm asking you, Enelu, do you know how to get to Qinghai?" On the opposite side, Enelu stared at him blankly, as if he had not come to his senses. He actually succeeded. "No, this is absolutely impossible. This is not true. The appearance of a natural type ability user is more difficult to accept than that of the other two types, like a god or a demon." Ron knew this very well and thought that Enel's fear was due to his appearance, so he didn't think as he thought. But he didn't take into account that since Enel chose to take refuge in the open space outside the temple instead of entering the temple, there was no reason for him not to know that there was a powerful old birdman in the temple. But he didn't say it, just the sinister intention that Ron would be beaten to death by the old birdman. In the end, Ron not only survived, he even. In an instant, his eyes widened, his pupils shrank, and the corners of his mouth twitched wildly. The next moment, he pounced towards Ron like a demon. "Do not! Spit it out! Spit it out! That's smen!" Ron raised his eyebrows and suddenly had a guess in his mind. Facing Enel's random fists, Ron sneered, took a step forward and used his shoulder to block Enel's swinging arm, then grabbed his wrist with both hands and lifted it up, pulling it outward to diagonally dissipate the resistance, then suddenly pressed it back, folded his hands over his chest and pushed down. Click! What? Being strong doesn't mean having strong defense. The skinny Enel's ability to withstand blows is definitely at the level of a small fry facing the pressure brought by the lever principle that Ron put all his upper body strength into. The fragile shoulder joint was instantly dislocated, making a crisp snapping sound. After a successful strike, Ron was as insidious as a hunting hyena. He dragged Enel's dislocated and swollen arm around him and kicked him in the knee, causing him to fall face first to the ground with a thump. If Ron hadn't been seriously injured and wasn't suitable for exerting intense force, he would have broken his neck right now. But even so, Enel was in great pain and fell to the ground, rolling wildly. With a bloody face, he stared at Ron with a pair of murderous eyes and struggled to roar at him. "That's mine, it's mine. Why didn't you die? Why didn't you die?" The voice was inexplicably sorrowful, and coupled with his miserable appearance, it was enough to make anyone who heard it cry and anyone who saw it feel sad. If he was not the victim, Ron might have sympathized with him for a few seconds. "As expected, because of my bad attitude, you deliberately concealed the truth and wanted me to be beaten to death by the Birdman." Ron suddenly felt like laughing. He thought that he was almost beaten to death just an accident. Sky Island Bika is a country after all, who knows if there is an organization like Guardian. But he didn't expect that the culprit was Enelu, whom he didn't take seriously at all. If the old Birdman had been more ruthless the first time, he wouldn't have had a chance of turning the situation around. "Don't underestimate anyone, Ron, your life is yours alone, you are responsible for it." Ron sighed, remembering what the retired military officer on Earth who taught him Sanda once told him. This time, he was careless after all. "I waited for that fruit for 5 years. 5 years. Do you know how I got here?" Enel roared madly, and then, under Ron's confused gaze, he grinned and laughed like an idiot. "Ha, ha 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 ha. It's gone. Everything is gone. I'm not the freak, he is. Ha 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 ha." Then he started dancing, waving his arms and legs. "The old priest is about to die, and the vacancy before the new priest takes over is his best chance to snatch the power of God. However, Ron appears, and Enel's 5 years of waiting are in vain. Now Enel, who is still just a bullied fry, cannot accept such a great blow and goes crazy. Just think about how I first destroyed Birdman's perseverance for who knows how many years and made him crazy, and then inadvertently made Enel's 5 years of forbearance come to nothing. What a coincidence, hiccups. Ron condensed his feet and stepped on the clouds. Looking at Enel's silly look, he burped and looked up at the sky speechlessly. I'm a bit speechless. But this is the world of One Piece. If you don't fight for it, someone else will take it. It is always better to take your destiny into your own hands than to expect others to be kind to you. Not good. At this moment, Ron suddenly felt a heat in his stomach, warm as if it was placed next to a stove, and at the same time there was a colic that was excruciating. Oh no! Is the fruit poisonous? As tribute to the gods, you actually chose something poisonous? He held his stomach, curled up, and his skin turned red. The heat did not get better with the movement, and it instantly swept through his body, just like the scorching sun in summer, making him sweat profusely. The heat spread all over his body, and Ron leaned against the wall of the island cloud uncomfortably, gasping for breath, his eyes full of bloodshot. The onset was so rapid, it must be highly toxic. It's too late to use any means at this moment, and I can only rely on my body to withstand it. Crack! As his whole body was burning with heat, a bolt of lightning as thick as an arm burst out from his skin, hitting the ground and making it dented and burnt, emitting a foul smell. Ron covered his increasingly painful stomach, suddenly unzipped his pants, and squatted down. Wow! Chapter 5, Kill and Fall into the Sea. The human body has a self-contained cycle. The body decides how much food it consumes each day to feel full, how much energy it consumes to feel tired, and how much sleep it needs to replenish energy. What allows the body to make judgments is the nutrient concentration in the food it comes into contact with every day and the natural balance developed with the body's daily consumption. In the past, on Earth, as an ordinary world, the most nutritious and energy-replenishing thing Ron could come into contact with was the sip of ginseng chicken soup he drank after crawling back from the gates of hell that year. The amount of energy and nutrition contained in food is limited to a certain amount. But this world is different. This world has monsters that can cover the sky with a leaf in the blink of an eye, behemoths as big as islands, and humans like Garp who can practice boxing with 8 mountains. If they want to survive, their requirements for vitality and nutrition are enormous. The source of support for their monstrous body consumption is the various foods in the One Piece world that are full of nutrition and high in energy concentration. As a human being who traveled from the barren world of Earth, Ron, who grew up eating ordinary food, is like a shriveled sponge. The food in the world of One Piece is a bathtub full of water. Therefore, in the face of the magical food in another world that was full of energy and rich in nutrition, his body was like a hungry beast, greedily swallowing every bit of energy. The terrifying thing about this world is that the energy contained in any food here is very easy to absorb. As long as the body needs it, it can be infinitely transformed and supplied, thus raising monsters that can smash mountains and rivers with their fists. After the nutrients are absorbed, the body, which is relieved of its bloating, begins to instinctively use excess energy to optimize itself and eliminate toxins. So Ron felt hot all over and had diarrhea after eating the fruit. After solving the problem and pulling up his pants, Ron thought slowly. With this kind of food, it seems that we can now do the exercises that we didn't dare to do before. As a madman who constantly challenges himself, Ron once made a very cruel exercise plan, but within 3 days, he was admitted to the hospital. The food on Earth was completely insufficient to replenish his exaggerated physical loss. On the first day, he began to urinate blood and suffered unbearable pain. For 3 consecutive days, he was just one step away from death. If his body wasn't different from that of an ordinary person and he hadn't been hanging on for the entire time, he wouldn't have had the chance to taste the chicken soup. Now that the food in the One Piece world is so terrible, the exercise plan that was once abandoned can finally see the light of day. Raiden should be able to join in. The ninjas in the Cloud Village can use lightning chakra to activate cells, so why can't I? Ron calmly took out the wet wipes he had put in his pocket before traveling through time and wiped his hands. He raised his head while thinking, his eyes fixed on Enelo, who was not far away and was staring at him the whole time. Have you finished reading it? It stinks. Enelo nodded, covered his nose with disgust. If Ron hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have thought that this idiot was the future Sky Island god Enelu. Ha. He raised his arm and gathered lightning between his fingers. ZZ. The sky blue electric current continued to gather, forming a ball of light emitting dazzling white light. In front of this powerful electric current, Enelu's hair stood up, and his afro was straightened. It seems like I found a reason why Enel wears a headscarf every day from now on. Ron thought so and then said. Thank you for providing me with the clue. In your next life, I hope you will be reborn in Qinghai. Before Enelu could say anything, boom! Thunder and lightning. Accompanied by a loud bang, a light blue lightning as thick as a thumb danced in the air. In a flash, it pierced through Enelu's forehead in an instant, and then disappeared into the distant clouds. This is the easiest move to use with the Thunder Fruit, Electric Shock. Strictly speaking, it doesn't deserve a name, it's just the simplest way to use it. The specific process is just like ordinary people spitting. Who would give their spit a name? Similar to Breath of Ice Dragon? The Thunder Fruit, it's so damn loud. Rubbing his ears that were itchy from the thunder, Ron threw the wet tissue he had used to wipe his hands on the ground and looked at Enel's body indifferently. A villain is always a villain, and a dog will always eat shit. Since he had such evil intentions, Ron would give him the worst outcome. The Sky Island guards gave Ron the first lesson of the Time Traveler class, which was to abandon the previous cognition and not impose the past thinking on the strange world. Here the law is useless, only the fist is eternal. Crackling. Sky blue thunder pythons coiled around his arms, and thunder exploded continuously, illuminating half of Ron's face. Feeling the thunder power in his body surge nearly twice, he murmured in shock, "What a magical thing! The energy brought by a bunch of fruits can actually make my physique so much stronger." As a user of special abilities, Ron can clearly observe the power of thunder in his body. Because the development level of the fruit is close to zero, he understands that this strengthening has nothing to do with the fruit, but only with his body. Just a few small fruits can make him twice as strong. It is conceivable that as long as he continues to eat the food from the One Piece world, the next long period of time, before his physical strength reaches a bottleneck, will be a period of rapid growth for him. A few minutes later, Ron strolled along the soft cloud beach of Bika, gazing at the distant sky with fascination. One Piece, Sky Island. This magical land turned from a cartoon into reality, which shocked him greatly. He had no chance to take a closer look before because he was being chased, but now he finally had time to appreciate this beautiful scenery. Wow! In the white clouds, a huge flying fish leaped up, its tail fin brought up a string of water droplets, and under the sunlight, it drew a rainbow. In the distance, the sea of clouds connected with the blue sky, up and down, giving people the illusion that the sea and the sky are upside down. This is a magical sight that cannot be described in words. At this moment, Ron finally felt a little joy of traveling through time. Looking at the sky, he was silent for a moment, then he suddenly grinned and couldn't help laughing. One Piece world, haha. Ha 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 ha. I came to the One Piece world. As a self-challenger who is unwilling to be ordinary, proficient in several extreme sports and constantly challenging himself, Ron has long been numb to the peaceful daily life. Crossing over to the dangerous world of One Piece, escaping from the predicament of being hunted down, obtaining the extremely powerful Thunder Fruit, killing someone for the first time. Ron only felt the blood that had been dormant in his body breaking out of the ice, like the sound of spring thunder and the blazing flames of a furnace, surging and hard to contain. Ha ha ha! Snapped. He laughed excitedly and lunged straight towards the soft cloud in front of his feet, wanting to lie on the ground. Suddenly, Ron looked horrified, his eyes widened. Oh no! Damn it! At this point, I have to mention what foundation the Sky Island without soil is built on. In addition to special clouds, Sky Island clouds are mainly divided into two types, island clouds and sea clouds. The former is generally hard and processable, just like ordinary stones in Qinghai, and is the main component of artificial foundations and buildings on Sky Island. The latter, as its name suggests, looks white and soft, but is actually filled with seawater. Everything on Sky Island is built on these two and is supported by them. Both contain the magical pyroboron keratin particles, but the island cloud is simply a solidified form of sea cloud and cannot restrain the ability users like the crystal of the sea stone. And the sea clouds are no different from normal sea water. On the coast, the soft clouds under Ron's feet were also a type of island cloud, similar to mud. But the white clouds in front of him were actually sea clouds. To the people of Sky Island, the two were clearly distinguishable, and there was no possibility of mistaking them. But to Ron, the scene before him was white, with no wind or waves, and it was a miracle that he could tell them apart. If his action was placed in Qinghai, it would be a devil fruit user standing on the edge of a cliff, facing the sea, and taking a leap of faith. At the same time, there was a silly happy smile on his face. And so, pfft! Gilyalu! Ron sank directly into the sea clouds and disappeared from the cloud surface in an instant. The new book is on the way and will be updated steadily. Please recommend and collect it. Chapter 6, Garp the Iron Fist falls from the sky. Falling into the sea, a string of bubbles slipped out from the corners of Ron's mouth, his face looked like a salted fish. Within one day, he experienced 3 experiences that he had never felt before. First, the pain of being hit by the shock wave. Second, he possesses the power of thunder in his body. Third, as a person with special abilities, soaking in the sea water makes you feel so weak and powerless that it makes your heart pounding and frightened. The bones were wailing, the fingers were unable to move, and the body was like a floating duckweed, drifting with the current. It's so uncomfortable. I want to die. I can't breathe. As it slowly sank, a sky shark swam over. After seeing the target clearly, it excitedly swung its tail and opened its mouth wide. As a carnivorous fish at the top of the food chain in the White Sea, the sky shark is well aware of the fate of these creatures with limbs in front of it if they fall into the sea. There is no room for resistance, it's simply a delicacy delivered to your door. Goo! The vibration of the water flow attracted Ron's attention. He tried to open his eyes and found the sky shark getting closer and closer. His face immediately turned pale. Fuck, what do you want to do, damn shark? He tried hard to gather lightning in his body to repel the sky shark. However, how could he, a new ability user, resist the restraint that so many people could not resist? Not to mention launching lightning attacks, he couldn't even feel the power in his body. He could only watch helplessly as the 2-meter-long sky shark rushed over and bit him with its mouth full of sharp teeth. Sizzle! Sizzle! Dazzling lightning flashed unsteadily, and large schools of fish fainted on the spot. In the dim sea water, a shark twitched in place, its tail swaying wildly. It regretted it. This kind of electric feeling throughout the body really made the shark unable to stop. The pyroboron keratin particles in seawater can indeed restrain people with special abilities and prevent them from using their abilities, but the content is very small and cannot change the person's appearance. Only sea stone and crystals of the sea with a higher concentration of pyroboron keratin particles can make the ability user lose all abilities, including elementalization. Therefore, the rubber that sinks to the bottom of the sea can still be stretched, and the lightning that sinks to the bottom of the sea is still lightning. Caught off guard, the confident sky shark bit Ron on the stomach, and he was immediately shocked by the overflowing lightning and convulsed all over, unable to move. "So why did you bite me? If you don't commit suicide, you won't die." With the light brought by the thunder, Ron looked weakly at the air shark that was stuck on his stomach and swaying and twitching. He wanted to laugh, but he didn't have the strength. Puff! Suddenly, the sun shines. Strength returned to his body, and his vision became brighter. Ron looked up at the sky and said in surprise, "I rushed out." But then his face turned dark and he was speechless. The good news is that since the White Sea is not the Qinghai Sea and there is no such thing as a seabed, he was able to crawl out from under the ocean after falling into the sea without worrying about drowning. But the bad news is, there is still that vast ocean below. Looking out, you can see the blue sea in full view. Where the sea and the sky meet, the sky and the sea are one color, and a few seagulls are flying on the beautiful arc of the planet. The picture is beautiful. Falling rapidly, the broken hair stood upside down. Ron sat cross-legged in the air and touched his chin. Speaking of which, the nature type ignores any physical damage, so there's no chance of dying from falling. But there's an ocean below, so if you don't die from falling, you'll drown at least. So. He turned his gaze and looked at the Kongsha beside him who was rolling his eyes and twitching from time to time, and the corners of his mouth twitched suddenly. If a person doesn't die from falling, he will drown. If a person doesn't die from drowning, he will fall to his death. This wave is going to be a disaster, brother. The first half of the Grand Line. A huge navy blue ship with numerous gun turrets and masts sailing across the sky, cuts through the sea and moves forward. On the deck of the towering ship, the busy soldiers in white navy uniforms looked as small as ants running on a banana leaf. On the thick mast at the front of the ship, a wide white sail was hung, with a seagull and Libra in the center, symbolizing the maintenance of world peace and order. This is a warship from the Marine Headquarters, Marineford, and it is the largest model that only officers above the rank of general are qualified to equip, a war behemoth. Ordinary pirate groups can be easily destroyed by ramming and artillery fire alone. The Navy has always deployed this type of warship to escort the world's nobles, the celestial dragons, which shows their confidence in it. However, the bow of such a significant and powerful warship has now been replaced by an unreliable entity. Instead, it is replaced by a cute dog head sculpture wearing a collar and holding a bone in its mouth. It has lost its majesty and is laughable. However, no one who travels on the Grand Line, or even any resident of the world who cares a little about naval intelligence, dares to look down on it. Because this dog-headed warship is the mount of Monkey D. Garp, the legendary figure of the sea who personally captured the pirate king Gold Roger and defeated the King of the New World Rocks, and is known as the hero of the Navy. At this moment, in front of the wide deck, there was a red beach chair that was very inconsistent with the solemn atmosphere of the warship. An old man was lying on it, kicking off his leather shoes, crossing his legs, and sleeping with his head tilted back. He was muscular, with a strong back and grey hair and beard, and his face was majestic without anger. If you ignore the glaring red beach chair, the beach umbrella standing nearby to block the sun, and the snot bubbles blowing from his nostrils, perhaps anyone who sees him would say something. What a strong and vigorous iron fist, Garp! Unfortunately, there is no. Tick. A drop of water hit his feet. Cap opened his sleepy eyes, looked up at the sky, and smacked his lips. It's going to rain again, the weather on the Grand Line. As the highest-ranking lieutenant general in the headquarters, Garp rarely goes on missions. If he is unhappy, he will ask for leave from his comrade-in-arms and Marshal Sengoku and go back to the East China Sea to see his grandson. The last passive strike finally angered Sengoku, who forced him to go on a mission, which Garp was very dissatisfied with. But what made people despair was that he messed up this mission. Hey! Imagine Sengoku's face turning blue and drooling, and Garp muttering, "Walk slowly, it's better to delay it for a day." Then he turned over and called to the adjutant standing behind him. Tryn, the storm is coming, get the soldiers moving. Understand? Adjutant Tryon immediately nodded and saluted, then turned to look for the navigator. Although Garp does not know how to sail, he has been sailing on the sea for decades, traveling north and south. He knows the weather on the Grand Route like the back of his hand. Ordinary navigators can't compare to him. But soon, Tryon came back with his head clasped. Vice Admiral Garp, the navigator said it won't rain. If only 1 or 2 people denied that Tryon would definitely not come back to report, but a group of more than 10 navigators were all sure that it would not rain, then Garp's conclusion would be questionable. Hearing this, Garp opened his eyes in confusion and looked up at the sky again. He said as he looked up, "That's not right. Rain was hitting my feet just now, and the wind direction is abnormal. If it wasn't raining, then it would be, what is it?" Tryon asked curiously. In response, Garp slowly lowered his head, looked into his eyes, and said seriously, "It's a weird shark and a man." Tryon. Chapter 7 Winning Over. "I feel like you are insulting my intelligence." Tryon growled in his heart. "Ha, ha, ha. How could there be a shark in the sky? Holy shit. Really?" After laughing dryly twice, Tryon raised his head and looked up at the sky in silence. But before he could finish his words, 2 black shadows fell down at an extremely fast speed. Through the fleeting image, it was indeed a strangely shaped shark and a person. Then, bang! The terrible impact swept across the entire warship. The towering warship shook continuously, pushing up layers of waves. Tryon swallowed hard, looking at the deck that was hit with a big hole, and the corners of his mouth twitched constantly. Speaking of Vice Admiral Garp, "If you have something to say, tell me. Since you discovered the falling object in advance, why didn't you shoot it away? He's still alive. Do you want me to kill him? So you chose to let him fall to his death?" Yes. Even Garp couldn't rescue the person at that ridiculous speed. He could withstand the terrible inertia brought by the high-speed fall, but who knows if the other person could do it. Don't be covered in a pile of meat paste and won't have to eat for a few days. After saying that, Cap lay back in his beach chair and frowned silently. With this speed and height of falling, it must be terrifying. But how could humans and sharks get to such a high place? Could it be a sky island? Tryon. Seeing that Garp didn't want to talk more, Tryon turned around, covered his face with a headache, and called the soldiers, "Go and ask someone to check the cabin and count the damage. And repair the deck first after cleaning it up. If he fell down at that speed, I'm afraid everything would be turned into a meat paste except Kaido, the 100 beasts of the New World 4 emperors whom he had never met." The giant warship War Behemoth was a war tool specially developed by the Navy to fight against the monsters in the New World. The overall structure was extremely solid and not so easy to be smashed through. Tryon was not worried about the safety of the bottom of the ship. But at this moment, Garp turned back inadvertently, his eyes suddenly focused, and he stretched out his hand to stop the soldier's actions. "Be careful! Don't go over there! Stop! Stay where you are!" As Tryon looked at him in confusion, Cap looked toward the deck, a hint of suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Those crawling are Raiden. Could it be that Thunder Fruit?" According to legend, the last user of the Thunder Fruit died on Sky Island. When he thought about the Thunder Fruit, which had disappeared for nearly 300 years and was known as the strongest natural fruit, seeing the light of day again, Garp immediately became interested. Sure enough, on the deck, lightning snakes kept crawling and gathering towards the center. Under the glaring sunlight, the thumb-thick sky-blue lightning was not noticeable. Several soldiers accidentally got a little closer, and their hands and feet suddenly became numb and trembled. Seeing this, Cap flew forward and lifted up several soldiers and threw them out at a speed that was completely inconsistent with his age. Ouch! Auntie! The soldiers fell to the ground, cried out in pain, and thanked Garp. But at this moment, Garp had no time to pay attention to them. Noticing the increasingly brighter lightning in the pit, his eyes lit up. It's really the thunder fruit. Discharge is an irreversible process of energy release and it is impossible to aggregate. Even Charlotte Linland's homage Zeus, one of the 4 emperors, must follow this law. Only the user of the thunder fruit, whose true body is lightning, can gather lightning. At this time, Tryon also realized that something was wrong and ordered the soldiers to take out their weapons. After the thunder and lightning disappeared, he shouted and muskets were placed on the edge of the pit, forming a circle. When Ron climbed out of the pit and looked up, this was the scene he saw. An old man as strong as a tiger with grey hair and beard, wearing a white banner, folded his arms across his chest, grinning at himself, and the white-clad sailors around him raised their guns and aimed at various parts of his body. A middle-aged man dressed as an officer squeezed out of the crowd, holding a knife and shouting fiercely, "Who are you? Why are you attacking a naval ship? Catch him! Wait a minute!" Ron waved his hand to stop Tryon from continuing. I fell down and got confused. Where are my feet?" Under the confused gazes of a group of people, he looked around, his face suddenly lit up with joy. He jumped to the corner, picked up a ball of lightning and stuffed it into his stomach. Crackling! Zzz! As the lightning spread, the missing leg quickly grew back. As a new naturalist, Ron was not very experienced in assembling his body. He was a little confused when he fell just now, and only when he stood up did he realize that he was missing a leg. After doing all this, he walked back to the edge of the pit, looked up and said, "Hey, upstairs, what year is it now? I'm full, I'm full." Under the warm sunshine and gentle sea breeze, Ron leaned against the fence and yawned comfortably. The thunder fruit is the strongest fruit ability in the natural system. In addition to its lethality, after elementalization, Ron can fly by relying on the high temperature of lightning and converting heat energy into kinetic energy. But correspondingly, elementalization is also a process of using fruit abilities, which requires a lot of physical support. After being hit by the old bald man, Ron's physical strength has long been exhausted. At the same time, Qinghai is vast and boundless, and it is all water. Ron does not think that his half-baked proficiency and the remaining physical strength can support him to fly to the next island. But there is always a way out, and the result is beautiful. There was a ship not far from where he fell. Ron gathered his energy and used his elemental transformation to fly onto the deck. At the same time, he grabbed the sky shark with one hand and flew together, preparing to make a shocking debut. After all, shark fin is a top-notch delicacy. But he overlooked one point, which is how fast is lightning. Kizaru's Pika Pika Nomi can definitely not reach the speed of light, but the thunder fruit can definitely reach the speed of lightning. In just a moment of acceleration, Ron disappeared in mid-air. The scene in his eyes was spinning and he didn't even know where he was flying. By the time he forced himself to retract his elemental transformation and opened his eyes, the warship was already within reach. Then he crashed into the lower deck. Fortunately, the warship was strong enough and was not smashed. But he was exhausted, and after eating, his previous serious injuries healed faster. The lack of blood supply to his brain made him too lazy to move, and he began to doze off little by little. But he didn't want to move, but someone else did. Da-da-da. The middle-aged adjutant Tryon trotted over with a pile of information in his arms. After saluting, he said to Garp, "Report." Vice Admiral Garp, according to the headquarters reply, there is currently no corresponding information on this person among the known pirates, assassins, dark world intermediaries, pirate hunters, and figures from other countries. So, your identity is clean. Cap's eyes lit up, and Ron, who was about to fall asleep, shuddered. Not a pirate, not a politician from various countries, not a criminal from the dark world, not even a pirate hunter. To put it bluntly, they are civilians, right? For now, yes. Tryon hesitated for a moment and nodded at this question. Although Ron's palms were calloused, his muscles were well proportioned, his skin was tight and shiny, and he looked like a pampered person. In addition, there was no murderous aura on him, and his eyes were clear and bright, so he couldn't be a villain. In the world of One Piece, as long as you don't have a criminal record in the government or the navy, you are considered to have a clean record. A clean-handed thunder fruit user, what else is there to say? Snapped. Cap flashed to Ron's side, squatted down and slapped him on the shoulder. At this moment, Ron actually wanted to run away. The old gangster's eyes were too scary, and he couldn't beat him. However, Garp was clearly aware that the movement speed of the thunder fruit was not inferior to that of the sparkle fruit, and the speed of its explosion was so fast that Ron was completely unable to react. At the same time, a strange power was wrapped around his hands. Although his palms did not turn black, it was definitely the armament haki. With his shaved and armed haki, he slapped Ron in the face, pinning him to the spot and leaving him no chance to move. The wrinkled old face came forward, and Garp smiled like a child in his 70s or 80s. "Young man, do you want to be a navy?" "It's this indeed." Chapter 8 Lose money? Yes, lose money. Ron's eyelids twitched rapidly. After noticing that Garp looked at him with a strange look, he immediately thought of this possibility. After that, Yinkin's attitude of asking the canteen to start cooking made him understand it even more clearly. Ron could guess a little bit about Garp's idea of recruiting him into the navy. Through communication, he learned that this year was October 1514, 10 in the Kayan calendar, the 14th year of the Great Pirate Era, a time when the navy was in a period of transition. The gap in succession here refers to the true peak, the strongest combat power of the Marine headquarters, the Admiral. Currently there is no one who can take over. No matter how outstanding Momosegi and Chiton were, there was a clear gap in strength between them and the admirals. Otherwise Fujitora and Green Bull, two civilian masters, would not have taken over the positions of admirals. Did the navy not care about the loyalty of these two people? Did they ignore the merits of Daotu and Chiton and directly airdropped a general? Of course. But the situation is stronger than people. The reputation of the admiral was earned by successive admirals over hundreds of years. It made countless people stand in fear, and wherever he went, the sea was in turmoil. Without the admiral, who is the strongest fighting force to intimidate the sea, the world will become incomparably chaotic. That kind of situation is definitely not what the world government and the navy want to see. Therefore, they would rather take the risk of promoting the folk masters Green Bull and Fujitora than let Momosagi and Chiton, who are not strong enough to take the position. Looking at the original work, what the navy lacks is never middle-level generals and grassroots soldiers. Among the 100,000 colonel-level officers in the Battle of Marineford, which one would be the easy one to deal with? Among the middle-level generals, there are 16 lieutenant generals from our headquarters, including Daotu, Chiton, Flying Squirrel, Huashaishan, etc. They are all powerful men who are feared by the sea. Among the lower-level generals, there are also outstanding figures such as Kobe, who will receive training under Garp in the future and will be rapidly promoted to colonel, and Smoker, who has a deep grudge with the Straw Hat Pirates and becomes stronger step by step. But the top level? They are all veterans. Each of them is over 70 years old. Even among the current 3 admirals, Kizaru is already in his early 50s and has passed his prime, so he won't be able to fight for many more years. Therefore, the current navy is very eager for a rookie who can go to the end and take over the position of admiral. With the support of the monster legends of the current 3 admirals, and the external pressure of the lack of successors to the top combat power of the navy, Ron, who fell from the sky at this moment, holding the strongest natural system Thunder Fruit, with a clean background and nowhere to go, naturally became a candidate worth a try. Even if we take a step back and think that Ron has limited talent and will not achieve much in the future, he can suppress an area of the sea just by relying on the inherent advantages of the thunder fruit. It can also prevent the possibility of Ron becoming a pirate and reduce the threat. Therefore, winning over Ron is a win-win for the Navy. But the problem is, Ron doesn't want to be a Marine. It has nothing to do with the troubles of the celestial dragons. Ron is free-spirited and does his own thing. Once he joins the Navy, he will be subject to militarized management, with restricted access, which is very troublesome. He did not choose to join the army on Earth, so he naturally has no interest in this place. Besides, Ron was lazy and didn't like to fight for anything. To be a Marine, he had to shoulder the name of justice and fight for justice on the sea, which was not what he liked. To sum it up, too much trouble. So rejection was certain, but considering the difference in strength between the two sides, Ron slowed down his tone and said tactfully, "That Vice Admiral Garp." "Yeah, I'm here. Tell me what you want." "I haven't said join yet, okay?" 1,000 horses were galloping through Ron's heart, throwing a head full of grass. Taking a deep breath and putting aside all the random thoughts, Ron looked seriously into Cap's eyes. "The world is so big, I want to see it." "Garb. Tyranny." Soldiers eavesdropping nearby. "This is a cultured person. Is the refusal so tactful? The world is so big, I want to see it. Why don't you say that the sky is so vast and you want to explore it? Fly up to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun?" Looking at Ron's sincere eyes, Cap immediately felt sick. If Ron directly refused and would rather die than obey, he would have nothing to say. Everyone has their own aspirations, and you can't force them. Garp understands this and might even support him. After all, his grandsons will become pirates in the future, or two. He has never been seen going out to sea to capture people. He admires and identifies with all those who have dreams and work towards their dreams. But Ron's attitude was obviously not that firm. That expression did not show that he had any opinion about the Navy, but that he simply thought it was troublesome, which made Garp a little unbearable. Whether it's the Navy or the pirates, there are many people on this sea who are desperate for their dreams. This is the general environment, which makes Garp very dissatisfied with Ron, a guy who simply hates trouble and has no ambition. One thing in particular made Garp extremely angry. How could the thunder fruit, which has not appeared in 300 years and enjoys the reputation of being the strongest lightning power, fall into the hands of such an unenterprising lazy guy? What a waste of resources! It's true that Iron Fist Garp is a good man, but he has never been a soft-tempered person. He immediately raised his fist, and the armament haki covered it, entwined and solidified. Along with the vibration of the air, a layer of dark luster covered the hand like armor, and a dangerous aura rushed straight to Ron's forehead. Grabbing Ron's collar, Cap put his sandbag-sized fist on Ron's forehead, looking at Ron's eyes that said, "I'm indifferent to whatever happens," and suddenly, "Ha ha ha ha!" I burst out laughing. "You don't want to join? That's fine too. Hey? So easy." Now it was Ron's turn to be confused. He thought Garp would insist or threaten with force, just like he did to Luffy, but he didn't expect him to just show his hand directly. Of course, the Navy is not a pirate or a bandit, and will not restrict your freedom in life. Garp laughed, then his face turned cold and he shouted, "Then, pay the money. Don't you think it's too troublesome to join the Navy? Then I'll cause you some trouble. I don't believe that I can't deal with you." Puff. Ron was stunned for a moment, looking at Cap in disbelief. "Am I right? Pay compensation." "That's right, pay the money." After that, Garp sneered and waved his hand, "Then so and so, settle the score with him. Understand?" Cap's adjutant, Tyranny, played the role of a loyal lackey at this moment, and the information he just brought over was actually prepared for Ron. He turned to the first page and cleared his throat. Mr. Ron, you ate a total of 10 kilograms of sea beast meat, 5 kilograms of fruit, and countless grains on this warship. Including labor costs and medical expenses, the value is 15 Baileys. 15W Bailey. You are blackmailing me. What kind of meat and medicine is worth 150,000? After saying this, Ron immediately jumped up and protested at the top of his voice. He admitted that as his physique grew stronger, his appetite became bigger and he was also shocked when he ate, but those fish caught from the sea were not worth anything at all. As for the wounds on your body, they will heal on their own if you leave them alone. Seeing that Ron was about to escape, Cap immediately used his fist to pin him down again. Tryon glanced at him calmly, lowered his head and continued, in addition, you damaged the Navy ship. The repair costs plus the medical expenses of the soldiers and the psychological damage to all of us on the ship will total 50 Baileys. Hee hee. Ron finally realized that these guys were completely shameless. But this is not the end. Tryon turned the page again. According to Article 157 of the Navy Regulations, if civilians damage naval warships without authorization, the case is serious and they shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not less than 1 year but not more than 3 years and a fine of 300 million Baileys. Mr. Ron, you not only damaged the deck and cabin, but also caused us to lose a lot of food and water. Your crime is even more serious. In summary, Mr. Ron, you owe us 365 Baileys. Tryon pushed up his non-existent glasses and smiled faintly, looking like a landlord who exploited the peasants. Of course, if you choose not to go to jail for 3 years, you will get 200 million Baileys a year, 600 million for 3 years, a total of 965 Baileys. Pay me. W.T.F. Buying prison with money at a price. Ron's eyes widened instantly, and an idea popped into his head. Do princes and generals like Xiang Ning have the guts? It's better to rebel against this extremely corrupt official. What do you think, kid? Don't accuse me of bullying you. You know what you did yourself. It's only natural to pay back a debt. Garp was picking his nose with his free hand. Seeing Ron's constipated face, he raised the corner of his mouth. Of course, if you join us, you will be one of us. As your superior, I will pay for you. You're welcome. At this moment, Cap was shining, and the heroic spirit of a generation of heroes was soaring to the sky. If there was no blackmail, Ron would really believe him. So Ron was so moved by these words that he rolled his eyes and grinned. Ha ha ha. 965W Baileys is not a small amount, rounded up to million, enough wealth for an ordinary person to live a lifetime. Ron doesn't really care about the amount alone. As a natural ability user, if he develops his fruit ability a little, he can move freely in the first half. In the Grand Line, pirates with bounties of tens of millions are everywhere, like a swarm of carp crossing the river, countless in number. It is easy to catch a few and exchange them for bounties, and collect 10 million. What's more, he can be employed by others. With the reputation of the Thunder Fruit, let alone a mere 10 million, there will be people who can afford 100 million. If you take a step back, you can also rob and plunder and go out to sea. However, he was absolutely certain that he didn't have that chance. Now Garp has the final say on where he goes on Garp's ship. Whether he can encounter pirates and earn a bounty is another matter. The charge of destroying naval ships alone is enough for Garp to restrict his personal freedom by legitimate means and not give him any chance. This is a naked conspiracy. Therefore, it is basically impossible to redeem oneself by paying money. Seeing that Ron was unhappy, Garp didn't want this promising young man to have a grudge against the Navy, so he softened his tone and persuaded him, actually, there's nothing wrong with joining the Navy. Let me ask you, do you want to be the Pirate King? One Piece. Gold Roger? Ron touched his chin and suddenly spat with disgust on his face, not interested. Chapter 9 Join for Greater Power. Ron said the three words, not interested, in a decisive tone. Due to his status, Cap had heard many similar answers in the past. But that undisguised, outrageous disdain was the first time I saw it. I immediately asked curiously, why? That's the great secret treasure left by the Pirate King Roger. You don't like it? Lieutenant General Garp. Trion's face darkened. As a Navy hero, how could you say this? Even if One Piece has a high status on the sea, even if Ron does not choose to join, as Navy members, they should not say such misleading words. However, as a notorious bastard in the world of One Piece, even Sengoku couldn't do anything to Garp. His idea as an adjutant was directly ignored by Garp, who was concentrating on waiting for Ron's answer. Actually, I'm a bit of a germaphobe. It is impossible for Ron to say that he is not interested in the great secret treasure One Piece, but he has to fight for it all his life to become the Pirate King. Haha. Stay wherever it's cool. Here's why. If Pirate King Roger brings the great secret treasure back to the sea, and competes with your navy and even the world government to achieve hegemony, just like the four emperors of the New World now, then in order to find that powerful force, I might really have to set sail to find the treasure he left behind. When Ron talked about Roger's behavior, he was full of contempt. But he didn't take anything with him, and didn't make anything public. Instead, you executed him. And he said those words before the execution. At this point, Ron's expression of disgust became even stronger. He threw the chicken leg he had taken a bite of on the ground, and then told the others, "Go find it quickly, that chicken leg is delicious." Bah! What a bullshit dream! To put it bluntly, it's just taking advantage of people's ambition and curiosity in pursuit of fame and fortune. Ron pointed at himself, turned around and asked Cap with wide eyes, "How cheap do I have to be to go looking for something he has discarded? What I want must be unique." If he had come here earlier and Roger had not yet become the Pirate King, then Ron would definitely fight with Roger to see who is the supreme ruler standing proudly on the sea. But now is the year 1514 of the Haiwan calendar, and the deceased Roger has become a legend, so Ron has no interest in the great secret treasure. He is not fighting Roger for the great secret treasure, but he is looking for the great secret treasure in order to fight Roger, the pride of heaven. This is a simple concept of priority. Hear this. Garb. Adjutant. The rest of the soldiers. This sentence, some of it cannot be refuted. Indeed. The great secret treasure One Piece is still unknown to the world today. We only know that there is a legend about it and the person who became the legend. But at the same time, Roger did not take anything out. He just went for a tour and then came back. Nothing happened except One Piece and one great pirate era. In this situation, it is not like Roger took a bite of the chicken leg, said it was delicious, and everyone went to find it, while throwing the chicken leg on the ground and abandoning it. In the past, they had some respect for those few pirates who fought for their dreams among the pirates who wreaked havoc on the sea, but now, after hearing these words, the admiration immediately turned into sympathy. Bitch! Those guys who clamor to become Pirate King are nothing but a group of dogs who are teased by Roger to pick up bones and steal things that others don't want. To describe big figures like Charlotte Linlin, Kaido, and Golden Lion as bitch. Garp imagined some unspeakable scenes in his mind, shuddered, and decided to avoid the topic. Ahem, well, since you don't want to be the Pirate King, what is your dream? Everyone has dreams. Ordinary people work hard to earn money to support their families and change their living conditions. Merchants take risks to become the rich and powerful. Nobles desire a more elegant life and higher rights. Pirates take pleasure in revenge and hope for wealth and fame. Dreams, or desires, are human instincts. My dream. Ron was slightly stunned, not understanding what Cap meant. Yes, your dream. In response, Garp sneered and pointed out teasingly, it can be seen that you don't hate the Navy, you just fear trouble. But there must be a reason for living, right? Who do you want to be? Or what do you want to get? Or do you want to change the status quo? These are all dreams. That's it. Ron fell into deep thought, thinking about this serious topic. Ron was not surprised that Garp revealed his thoughts. As the saying goes, old people become cunning, and those who are still alive are thieves. Facing Garp, a veteran who has roamed the sea for decades, he could not hide his thoughts. But then again, what dreams could he have? A guy who was born with an extraordinary physique, what he used to do most was to constantly challenge himself and surpass his limits, enjoying the rapid secretion of adrenaline and the thrill of being on the line between life and death. Its purpose? No. He simply enjoyed the process, adding fun to his ordinary and boring daily life and escaping from numbness. Coming to the bizarre world of One Piece with countless powerful warriors, Ron is well aware of his own weakness. Strong men like Garp can kill him countless times with just a flick of their fingers. So in Sky Island Bika, in order to survive in this world, he wanted to get the thunder fruit as ferociously as a wild beast guarding its food. That is the best opportunity for him to continue to enjoy a wonderful life. Traveling to the world of One Piece not only freed him from his shackles, but also opened a door for him, making the word dream seem far away from him, yet so close to him. My dream is to not be content with being ordinary. In fact, there is something Ron didn't say just now. Through the original work, from the perspective of God, One Piece is almost certain not to be a powerful force that can destroy the world like ancient weapons, but it is a force that shakes the foundation of the world government's rule, the truth and symbol of people's hearts and minds. No matter what value and meaning this truth has for the world, anything that can't make him stronger is bullshit, and Ron doesn't care about it at all. And so, a fierce aura emanated from Ron uncontrollably, the crackling electricity began to stir, and the air became dry. Cap's eyes lit up. He approached Ron, who was deep in thought, and whispered in his ear like a devil, "You want to become stronger, right? Become stronger?" The whisper was like a rolling spring thunder, flashing a bright light in his mind. Ron's pupils suddenly shrank, and he recalled the excitement that surged in his heart after obtaining the thunder fruit. Ron muttered to himself as he lowered his head and looked at his hands. "Yes, I want to become stronger. This is the answer." Snapped. Ron raised his head suddenly, pushed away Garp's fist that was against his head, and asked seriously, "What can I get by joining the Navy? What can I get?" Ha 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 ha. Cap was stunned for a moment, then stood up and laughed out loud. He knew that Ron was moved. This guy is like my hawk, who has no distractions and only wants to become stronger. As a behemoth that suppresses the world's seas, when it comes to making people stronger, who else can do it but us, the Navy? Hurrah! For a moment, a huge aura burst out, and the air was agitated. The cloak of justice was blown by the strong wind, making a rustling sound. Ordinary soldiers could not stand steadily in front of Garp's domineering momentum. With fear and admiration on their faces, they locked their eyes on the tall and strong figure. But Ron remained unmoved, staring at Cap with burning eyes, waiting for an answer. Swish! The laughter suddenly stopped, Garp crossed his arms, and the next moment he grinned like a mischievous boy. "Don't you already have the answer to this question in your mind, you little thunder devil?" The 6 styles of the Navy, Haki, Kendo, practical experience, and the strongest teacher, Zephyr, who taught the current 3 admirals and several vice-admirals of the headquarters. Everything Ron wants is in the Navy. All these factors can be summed up in one sentence. Strength. What can you get by joining the Navy? The answer is obvious. Ron's mouth curled up slightly, forming a faint smile. Then, for greater power, I choose to join. Chapter 10 Daily Life on the ship 1 month later. On the blue sea, the dog-headed warship rode the wind and waves, cutting the sea apart like a pair of scissors. The mast was majestic, the sails were fully propped up, and the military flag on top fluttered in the strong wind, which was daunting. But besides the rustling sound of the ships sailing, if you listen carefully, you can also hear dull thunder-like explosions coming from the warships. Bang! On the deck of the warship, a waist-thick lightning bolt struck down. As the thunder exploded, silver snakes danced wildly, denting the thick metal baffle and destroying it. The overflowing electric current was violent and scattered everywhere. When the soldiers got a little closer, the hairs on their faces stood up and their skin felt numb. They were all terrified. However, they did not retreat or flee in all directions. During the 1-month voyage, Roan's errand boys were able to control the affected area well before Vice Admiral Garp allowed them to exercise in the open area of the deck. Out of trust in Garp, they firmly believed that Roan would not harm them. Sure enough, the sky blue thunder that was flying and dancing in the air in the last second quickly disappeared in the next second. Except for the lingering fear and the smell of stench, it was as if it had never appeared. Boom! There was a deafening roar and thunderous explosions, accompanied by high-temperature lightning. A figure stood up from the thunder, and the dazzling lightning outlined his figure. Ron, with his upper body naked, stood in the center of the scrapped iron plate. Seeing this, the soldiers looked at each other and roared wildly in their hearts. Here he is! The most powerful errand boy in the history of the Navy. That's right! Adler. Since he had just decided to join and had not officially registered at any base, Ron was not even a new recruit in the Navy and could only work as a handyman on the Garp ship. But at the same time, he held the Thunder Fruit, and his physique was different from that of ordinary people, and he grew very fast. As the thunder roared, his strength was now extraordinary and jaw-dropping. So it's fun. On this warship, apart from Garp who possesses the armament Haki and his adjutant Tryon, Ron, a errand boy, can be ranked third in combat effectiveness. In the face of the natural elementalization, all soldiers and officers at all levels are helpless against him, and the strongest errand boy in history is born. After forming a body shape, Ron stopped moving, his chest rising and falling, waiting for his strength to recover. The continuous bursts of the strongest electric currents were very exhausting for him. If he hadn't been strengthened through electric shock stimulation over the past month, plus sufficient supplies and rapidly increased physical strength, he would have been exhausted after just one move. Snapped! ZZ! Clenching his fists, with electric light flowing on them, Ron looked at his hands and nodded with satisfaction. At present, it seems that the direction is not wrong. Before developing the ability of the fruit, the physique is the most important. It made sense to join the Navy, because the Navy had perfect logistics and never lacked nutritious food. In addition, Garp was friendly and would answer any questions he had. The strength of the top existence in this world is so powerful that it makes Ron breathless. The Thunder Fruit is nothing more than full of potential in front of those monsters. Only by understanding his own weakness can he have the belief to work hard to become stronger. Apart from that, Ron doesn't mind what he is doing. During this month, Ron put all his energy into physical training. He developed a method of using lightning to stimulate muscles to cause pain for self-harm training, which is similar to the activation of lightning chakra in Naruto, but the specific process is somewhat different. The principle was actually very simple. Although the natural elementalization was a passive skill, it was still controlled by the main body. So Ron kept his body in its original state and then bombarded it with thunder from both the inside and the outside. The act of forced self-harm would make him immune to most damage due to the priority of his natural constitution, but he did not need too much damage. Even a tiny part would be enough to stimulate his muscles and bones to exercise, and for the first time, he fainted from the pain. If it weren't for his self-healing ability, he might have become disabled. After a month of familiarization and exploration, he found the limit of his body's endurance and would not experience that kind of situation again. However, after each training session, the ferocious appearance of the man covered in blood made Garp's heart stop suddenly. Just exercise. Do you have to be so cruel? Now, with his physical strength strengthened, even without further developing the fruit ability, Ron's thunder power has been greatly improved. From the beginning, only 10% of his strength could kill ordinary people, to now. It can already reach 10 million volts. Even if you are not straightforward, you are strong. JPG. Tisk, I thought the deck was pierced because of the loud noise. Is this the result? At this time, Cap came over with donuts in his arms, and the contempt in his tone was not concealed at all. In fact, he admired Ron's efforts and tenacity, and was very satisfied with his progress. Although Ron hated trouble, he was indeed talented. With him joining, the Navy would have great things to look forward to in the future. However, as a member of the monkey family, he was better at expressing his concern in this way. I am very satisfied with this result in just 1 month. Ron rolled his eyes at this and threw his hands out. You are a typical example of greed. Don't be too greedy. Faced with Ron's unyielding retort, Cap almost choked. Fortunately, after a month, he had a deep understanding of Ron's ability to irritate people. Then he thought that it would not be his responsibility to train Ron in the future, so he was too lazy to correct him. At this moment, looking at the charred and smoking center of the iron plate, recalling Ron's previous moves, Cap swallowed the donut and skipped the topic. But Ron, although I don't know exactly how to develop the abilities of the natural system, there is one thing I can guarantee. Hey? What's up? Ron took the towel handed to him by the admiring soldier and wiped his sweat, then turned back and waited with shining eyes. During this month, Carp had demonstrated his terrifying power at the top of the world with his actual performance. Besides talent and hard work, his rapid improvement was also closely related to his teaching by example. So Ron listened attentively to Cap's advice. Seeing this, Garp grinned and said speechlessly, the power used by natural ability users does come from themselves. It is true that all elemental attacks are emitted from the inside of the body, but the way you launch yourself as a cannonball is absolutely wrong. Yes, the lightning just now did not shoot out from the thunder drum or arm like Enelu, but Ron himself turned into thunder and shot towards him. Ron could obviously use his arms to fire lightning of equal power, but he chose this method. Capna was quite speechless. It's not wrong, either. The thunder fruit ability turns the whole body into lightning. With the destructive power of lightning, standing still is a deadly weapon. Just like the Shandia warrior Kamachi used a spear to pierce Enel's head, but was electrocuted half to death. Ron has no problem using it this way. But all this is based on the premise that there is no armed color domineering. Once the opponent has mastered armament haki, this move is equivalent to asking yourself to be beaten, which is absolutely wrong. What? It turns out to be this. Ron, who thought Garp would have some good ideas, curled his lips and turned his head. I am practicing my future moves now. Who told you that I must turn my whole body into lightning to launch an attack? Hiss, what's with that look in your eyes? That expression of I obviously overestimated you made Carp's teeth itch, and he kicked his feet, turned into a black line, instantly crossed a distance of more than 10 meters, and raised his fist. Duan! After punching down, watching Ron crouching with his head in his hands to defend, Cap felt relieved. He bit the donut happily and skipped the topic again. What future moves? Tell me about them. This petty old bastard. If I can't beat him, I will endure it. The corner of his mouth twitched, and Ron took a deep breath. You told me that Admiral Kizaru has a light speed kick, which relies on the accumulated inertia of the elemental movement speed, and then converts the kinetic energy into potential energy by kicking. Combined with the lethality of the high-density concentrated light particles themselves, it can blow up a snow mountain with one kick. What next? Of course, Carp remembered this incident and continued to ask. Then, I gave it a try. Ron spread his hands and shrugged. The result is not optimistic. I didn't have time to attack while moving at high speed. My reaction speed was not fast enough, and the speed of transforming from elemental to physical form at the moment of contact was also the same. Oh! I see. Garp understood and hammered his palm. Actually, you didn't want to use lightning to attack the iron plate just now, but wanted to change back a moment before contact and attack with fists and feet like Kizaru. Exactly. Ron folded his arms and nodded. The next second, Cap smiled sideways and glanced at Ron. Pfft. Sorry, without your explanation, I really didn't see it. Ron. Hiss. I have such a bad temper. Just then, Tryon came over to the two of them and removed the earplugs. Too loud, probably the only side effect of the thunder fruit. As lightning, it will release a lot of heat, causing the surrounding air to heat up and expand. The air that is instantly heated and expanded will push the surrounding air, causing strong explosive vibrations, thus producing a deafening explosion sound. The heat from Ron's lightning can now be used to smelt metals, and the thunder can be imagined to be as loud as needing a sword made of good steel. The people on the whole ship were almost nervous because of the thunder so close, so Cap asked everyone to wear earplugs. When Ron finished his chores during the day and started practicing, unless necessary, everyone on the boat communicated through gestures, eye contact, and even flag signals. Vice Admiral Garp, we can see the headquarters port now. Please give us your instructions. Oh? Has that much time passed? Garp looked back and saw a tall fortress coming into view on the distant sea level. A blessing is not a disaster, and a disaster cannot be avoided. Notify everyone, prepare to dock. Chapter 11 Naval Headquarters Test. Navy Headquarters, Marineford. A huge fortress like a mountain stands here, with two huge black Chinese characters just as painted on the outer wall, solemn and majestic. The wide square in front of the fortress can accommodate 100,000 people. Ships come and go in the bay port, and warships stand in rows. The naval flag flying high tells of faith and strength. This is the headquarters of the Navy, Marineford. The behemoth that suppresses the sea. On top of that magnificent white fortress is the office of the highest naval commander, the Admiral. There is an old man in the office. He looks dignified without anger. He is tall and strong. His eyes are steady and full of wisdom. Just one look at him makes people feel scared. The funny frog glasses and the seagull combing its feathers on his head do not make him look funny, but make people hard to understand his thoughts. This is the highest commander of the Navy headquarters, the current Navy Marshal and Wise General, Buddha's Warring States. He was the only one in the empty office, accompanied by the goat and the seagull who would never leak secrets. As a naval admiral, there were many things that could not be known to his subordinates, and he had to bear them alone. At this moment, Jean Guo looked through the window at the port as if he had realized something, and his wrinkled old face suddenly broke into a smile. Are you finally back, Garp? Iron Fist Garp went to Hawaja to carry out a secret mission. Although the mission was not smooth, he picked up a clean-handed user of the Thunder Fruit on the way back, which made Sengoku very pleased. The power of the natural system is undoubtedly terrifying. The elementalization makes them powerful in the early stage, and they are invincible. In the later stage of awakening, they are even more invincible, just like the current three generals. A natural type, and the user of the Thunder Fruit who has disappeared for hundreds of years and is known as the strongest natural type, joined the Navy. Sengoku clapped his hands and stamped his feet in excitement. Moreover, after a month on the ship, Garp reported back Ron's efforts and talent, which made Sengoku even more happy to have a new member, the young tiger, in the Navy. As for the report made by Garp, saying that Ron had a character flaw of being disrespectful and nagging others, Jean Guo said it doesn't matter. Compared to the current three generals, one is extreme, one is lazy, and one doesn't care. Ron is already perfect, okay. As long as he is loyal to the Navy and follows orders, even if Garp is so angry that he has a cerebral hemorrhage, Sengoku will forgive him, and maybe even applaud and cheer. Now that the dog-head warship brought Ron back to the headquarters without any problems, Zhang Guo breathed a sigh of relief. But he quickly stopped smiling and regained his dignified look. No, I can't be happy too soon. Having been the marshal for so many years, Zhang Guo has seen a lot talented people who are given intensive training either become arrogant and die at sea, or stop making progress and become ordinary people. Even if it is a natural system, it is not certain that you will reach the top. After thinking for a moment, Sengoku took out his den mushi and said, immediately notify Vice Admiral Tsuru, Vice Admiral Garp, and Chief Instructor Zephyr to come to my office for a meeting. Yes. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Guo thought silently. The situation on the sea has been stable in recent years. We have enough time to train Ron. But before that, we must ensure that he is loyal to the Navy. After all, it was picked up in a magical way. Zhang Guo was a little worried. The philosophical question of whether power controls people or people control power. What Zhang Guo saw from this incident was Ron's restless heart. He could join the Navy today for greater power, but who could guarantee that he would not give up the Navy for greater power? A jade in the rough still needs to be polished, but if the jade is only gold and jade on the outside and rotten inside, it cannot be saved. The warring states do not want the Navy to cultivate the next Drago with all their efforts. Ron had always thought that the Shanlin warship that Garp was riding on was already a gigantic monster. But when he got off the ship and looked at the majestic and magnificent tall buildings in front of him, Ron clearly realized how ridiculous his previous thoughts were. Compared with the magnificent and towering fortress of the Navy headquarters, Marineford, the dog-headed warship is tiny, like a kitten next to an elephant, and they are nothing more than fleas on the kitten. Such a huge building will make people feel fear and admiration just by looking at it. The Navy headquarters is worthy of being the strongest force in the sea. The soldiers lined up to get off the ship. Cap suddenly noticed the surprise on Ron's face and came over triumphantly. How is it? Are you dumbfounded? Pretty courageous, right? Then he waved his hand and introduced him in a domineering manner. This is the marine headquarters that suppresses the sea, Marineford. What are you so proud of? Ron came back to his senses and curled his lips in disdain. I was stunned by such a magnificent fortress that shocked my heart. What does it have to do with you? Did you build it? Garb. This is indeed the truth, but I always feel like something is not right. When Tryon heard this, he raised his eyebrows, and then gave Ron a thumbs up. Well done, young man. Screw the old bastard. As an adjutant, Tryon often vomits blood. At this time, an officer wearing a banner of justice came over, stood at attention with his feet together, and looked at Garp with a passionate gaze. Lieutenant General Garp. Marshal Sengoku notifies you to go to the office for a meeting immediately. In the eyes of most people, the Navy hero Garp is just a little careless, but there is nothing wrong with him. But in the eyes of veterans who are familiar with him, especially his peers, Garp is a bastard without any preservatives. Got it. I'll be there right away. Cap was still pondering what he had just said. He waved his hand nonchalantly and walked forward while saying, Tryon, I'll go over first. You take the Thundering Kid to the recruit camp, and remember to bring me a copy of the test results. Understand? Watching Cap walk away, Ron touched his chin and asked curiously, Major General Tryon, what do I want to test? Shouldn't I go directly to the Naval Academy for classes? On the ship, Ron learned about the relevant information and knew that the Navy had the Navy Academy and the recruit camp. The former Navy Admiral Blackarm Zifa commanded the recruit camp, while the Naval Academy was only managed by a Major General. Due to incomplete information, he thought that the new recruit camp led by Zephyr himself was the legendary Tianlong School. As a civilian rookie, he could only enter a lower-level military school. The world of One Piece is a semi-feudal society with the world aristocrats Tianlong people. There is a huge difference between aristocrats and civilians. In response, Tryon smiled and explained. You misunderstood, Ron. Although the Navy headquarters has 2 areas for training new recruits, only the recruit camp is a formal institution. The Naval Academy is a place where young children of naval families and children with good potential learn and train to lay the foundation from an early age. After graduating from the academy at the age of 15, they enter the recruit camp and are assigned to different units based on their performance after passing the training. With your current age and strength, you don't need to go to a military academy to lay the foundation. You can directly enter the recruit camp for training. After hearing the explanation, Ron suddenly understood. I just find it strange. When Kizaru joined the Navy in his 30s, he also entered the recruit camp. Why did I go to the Naval Academy? It was all because of my lack of education that I almost ended up entering the senior class of kindergarten as an older student. As the strongest force in the One Piece world, the Navy is not only made up of humans, but also various races with special talents. There are long-legged people with long legs and feet, long-armed people with curved arms and 3 joints, and some smart animals that don't look like animals. They are dressed in Navy uniforms and sweat profusely on the playground for training. The mountain peak that just passed by in the distance was Vice Admiral Donald, one of the Navy's giant forces. Half of his palm was longer than Ron himself. Following Major General Tryon, Ron admired the magical scenery all the way and soon arrived at a tall building inside the new recruits' barracks at the rear of the fortress. Tryon stopped and verified his identity with the guard, then spoke to Ron. Don't be nervous, just act like you normally do during training. The test results are only to determine what you are lacking and what you should supplement, so that the instructor can sort it out and arrange training courses for you. As the saying goes, all-round targeted teaching, teaching students in accordance with their aptitude. As a nature-type warrior, Smoker certainly would not waste time learning swordsmanship in the recruit camp, but instead learning how to use and release his abilities. The instructors in the recruit camp will develop targeted training based on the test results, so that every soldier can get the maximum training and progress. What else can I say about this? Ron joined the Navy just to become stronger. He can't take this test even if he is not allowed to. His eyes immediately lit up and he pushed open the door confidently. Don't worry. I never fail to deliver at the critical moment. Chapter 12 Kizaru Shozo's Sneak Attack Test. Watching the door slowly close, Major General Tryon breathed a sigh of relief. He could have gone in with them, but with someone else showing up, he felt it necessary to stand outside for a while. When I turned around, I saw a figure appear in the empty place just now, leaning against the wall and trimming his nails. Swish! The guards and Tryon stood at attention and saluted, shouting, General Kizaru. The person who appeared outside the test point at this time was none other than Yellow Monkey Borsellino, one of the 3 most puzzling admirals of the Navy in the original work. He was wearing a bright yellow suit and a general's banner of justice with ornate epaulets on his shoulders. He had black curly hair, a beard on his face, a pair of sunglasses, and was tall and thin. The reason why he is hard to figure out is that Kizaru has never shown any obvious purpose in the original work and is indifferent to everything. 2 years after the big event, Akainu and Aokiji fought a fierce battle in Punk Hazard for the position of admiral due to their different ideologies, but Kizaru showed no interest at all, as if he didn't care at all about the style in which the Navy would act in the future. Akainu and Aokiji can be said to be the hawk and dove of the Navy with clear positions, but Kizaru, to be honest, no one can see through him. A certain comment on Earth analyzed Kizaru very clearly, and it said this. Kizaru has no emotional entanglement, no entanglement in judging justice, and he has no uncertainty or hesitation about anything in any sense. He is just responsible for carrying out the mission, that's all. Excluding the secrets behind this person, from this point of view alone, Ron is a replica of Kizaru. It's just that his starting point is different. He really doesn't want to think about the trouble and doesn't want to think about the twists and turns. At this moment, Kizaru was leaning against the wall, trimming his nails with a nail clipper. Hearing the salute, he blew on his fingers for a moment before raising his head. His eyes skipped over Tryon and locked onto the closed door, and he spoke very slowly. Hey, Tryon, the one who just went in is the user of the thunder fruit, right? Why would Kizaru care about this? Isn't he indifferent to everything? Tryon was confused, but because of his position, he immediately replied, Yes, Admiral Kizaru. His name is Ron, and Vice Admiral Garp asked me to bring him to the new recruit camp for testing. Ron. Kizaru repeated the name, blew away the dust on his nails, slowly stood up, and said to Tryon. Then let's go in and take a look. The thunder fruit, the lightning in the sky? It's so scary, so scary. Tryon didn't understand what was going on, so he could only hold his head high and say, Yes, sir. The test site was an empty sand and gravel field, without any people or equipment, as empty as a desert. When Ron walked in, he immediately thought he had walked into the wrong place. He looked back at the wall and the tall fortress outside, and then he was sure that he had not traveled through time again. This is not the same as the gym-like test field he expected. Aside from the high-tech equipment unique to the One Piece world, why can't I see even a single person? At the top of the high wall behind Ron, in a room built into the wall, Kizaru and Tryon stood there, watching Ron's every move through the window. After seeing Ron cautiously step forward, Kizaru pouted and smiled obscenely, No one? This style of test, is it from the teacher's beloved disciple, Brigadier General Shozo? The only person who can be called teacher by Kizaru is the chief instructor of the recruit camp, the former Admiral of the Navy, Black Arm Zephyr. However, the two had been at odds for a long time because of some philosophies, and Kizaru never asked about the affairs of the recruit camp. Tryon didn't expect that he would know Shozo's testing style so well. Yes, it should be Instructor Shozo. After a second of hesitation, Tryon quickly replied. All the instructors in the recruit camp were selected, except Zifa and Shiuzo, who retired. This caused a stir in the headquarters, so Tryon was very familiar with them. Hearing the answer, Kizaru pouted, and his wrinkled face made this wretched expression frighteningly ugly, Yoshi. It seems that Mr. Zifa cares a lot about Ron. This is going to be interesting. The corners of Tryon's mouth twitched at this, but he couldn't refute it. If it was that Shiuzo, he could indeed most accurately test Ron's current shortcomings, but the process. At the same time, in the marshal's office, Sengoku, who had heard the report, looked at Zephyr with a little surprise and asked, He has only gained the ability of the fruit for about a month and has not undergone any actual combat training. Are you sure you want to let Shozo take charge? Shozo's testing method is simply the nightmare of every new Navy recruit. Please rest assured, Marshal, Shiuzo will know what to do. In response, Zifa answered confidently, and at the same time glanced at someone who was sleeping soundly across the table, grinning, and I want to check whether he has been led astray and needs correction after a month on Vice Admiral Garp's ship. Snapped. The snot bubble burst, and Garp opened his eyes blankly and looked around. What just happened? Why do I suddenly feel cold? But thinking that this was Sengoku's office and no accidents could happen, Garp rubbed his nose, tilted his head back, and continued to sleep. Suddenly, black energy burst out from Zhangguo's body, and his teeth began to clench. Ka-pi. In the wide sandy and gravel area, Ron walked forward slowly, his muscles tense. He did not let down his guard just because there was no one there. As a naval stronghold, it was unreasonable for no one to guard it. Besides, since it was a test, anything could happen. What? After taking a few steps forward and stepping on the ground, Ron exclaimed in surprise, then suddenly squatted down, grabbed a handful of sand, rubbed it in his palm, and seemed to be thinking about something. I see. Hey, you're the new recruit here for the test, right? Sorry, I just had to go to the bathroom. Wait a moment, the test will begin immediately. Suddenly, a voice suddenly sounded, and Ron turned back instantly, and lightning almost burst out of his body. However, he immediately restrained his impulse, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Okay. Instructor, please feel free to. A small door was pushed open on the wall, and a naval officer walked out. The shoulder badge on his body told him that he was a colonel. If nothing unexpected happened, he was the instructor in charge of the test. Come to think of it, it's been a while since anyone has come for the test. It's not the half-yearly test period for new recruits anymore, and I was suddenly pulled back to take the test while eating. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you alone, little brother. The colonel walked over complaining and apologizing to Ron. It's okay, I just arrived too. Am I mistaken? Ron stood there, looking awkward and somewhat doubtful about his life. Seeing Ron's dazed expression, Kizaru in the stand slowly curled up his lips into a smile. Coming. Bang. As predicted. The voice just fell. The next second, the dust behind Ron suddenly exploded, and a figure emerged from the ground like lightning and rushed behind Ron in an instant. The sharp-eyed Kizaru discovered that the man's fist was wrapped in pitch-black domineering aura, and Ron could not dodge this punch by using elemental transformation. This is the testing style of Brigadier General Shozo, the person in charge of the testing ground. Actual combat. In his eyes, soldiers are meant to fight. Testing speed and strength, which is like a tedious exercise, cannot be said to be meaningless, but it is not as accurate as actual combat data. Especially when facing a sneak attack, a person's actual combat ability can be best reflected. An elite naval officer, who has mastered dual-color domineering and the 6 sword styles, insidiously hides underground and launches a sneak attack on the recruits. There is no escape or blockade. No wonder Shozo's test is regarded as a nightmare by every recruit. Chapter 13 Thunder and Rain in the Underground Passage. Ron noticed it the moment the sandstorm exploded. The lightning man physique brought by the thunder fruit made him very sensitive to electric fields. Although he was limited by the development of the fruit and could not generate an electromagnetic field covering a huge area like Enelo to control the overall situation, he had no problem radiating electric current to the surroundings and receiving feedback. After entering the test site and discovering that something was wrong, Ron did not stop testing the current. As expected, there was something strange here. The magnetic field around him was very chaotic, as if something was interfering with the radio waves. However, after checking the sand and gravel, he found that there was no metal powder mixed in it. The empty sand and gravel was in full view, and there was no way to hide the special equipment that interfered with the magnetic field. At this point, you can rule out the possibility of being targeted. And the closer to the ground, the more chaotic the magnetic field becomes. This means that there is a lot of steel under the test site, which interferes with the current fluctuations he released. And where he stood, there was a gap in the electromagnetic feedback, leaving a 1-meter gap, enough for people to enter. This is a tunnel made of pure steel? Ron thought strangely. For what? Emergency shelter? Or is testing required? While probing downwards, Ron discovered a huge steel map, which made him a little confused. So even though an instructor appeared ahead, he was still wary of the underground and never let his guard down. I see. A sneak attack test. Ron, who was very smart, instantly understood the true meaning of the test. The reason for the existence of the underground passage was self-evident. At this moment, he wanted to thank Garp for his teaching by example for a month. Even if he didn't look back, he knew that the other party was a master who could use armament haki. The natural element that he was used to relying on could not avoid it and would be hit. Rushing forward or moving sideways. No. The opponent is agile and his explosive speed is no slower than mine, so he will be hit as well. So. At the critical moment, Ron wrapped his right foot with thunder and condensed it into a sharp knife, and stepped down hard. Boom! He stepped hard, and smoke and dust exploded on the spot. The figure rushed forward, and his fist almost touched the back of Ron's head, but it was only almost. The fist brought a sharp wind, which made the back of his head hurt. The two of them missed by a hair's breadth, allowing Ron to turn into lightning and seize the opportunity to escape into the ground. In the stands, Kizaru and Tryon looked over there in shock. In front of the observation haki, they knew exactly what Ron did. Actually, dodged? A newcomer dodged Brigadier General Shiuzo's sneak attack. Do you want to be so perverted? After a long while, Kizaru asked blankly, did you tell him about the test site in advance? I swear on my military duty. Tryon raised his right hand, his face solemn, absolutely not. Just now, Ron stomped his feet hard, causing the ground to collapse, and avoided the fist wrapped in armed color domineering by a hair's breadth. Kizaru considered that Ron would rely on elemental transformation and be knocked away by Shiuzo, and considered that he would dodge with a movement speed that was not inferior to his own phantom fruit, but as long as the distance was not too large, Shiuzo had plenty of ways to hit him. No matter how fast the movement speed was, if the reaction speed could not keep up, it would just be a simple escape, which was meaningless in the battle. However, it didn't happen. Ron seemed to know in advance that the sand under his feet was just a disguise. He stomped on the ground heavily and entered the underground passage. Yes. Just as Ron had guessed, the central area of the test field was covered with steel tunnels. Shiuzo hid underground, determined the location by the sound of footsteps, and chose the exit to launch a sneak attack. This move has always been successful, and it always works. It has caused nightmares for countless geniuses, and they no longer have the arrogance and confidence they had before joining. Tryon swore an oath on his military duty, which was a very serious oath. Kizaru immediately took a breath of cold air, restrained his expression, and said in a lewd tone, "The user of the thunder fruit. Is it that the thunder fruit is too scary? Or is it that the user of the thunder fruit is too scary?" Shiuzo was not surprised that the attack missed. Like Kizaru, he knew that Ron was the user of the thunder fruit and had incredible speed. Without using the shaving skill, the chances of this punch hitting him were slim, unless Ron was stupid enough to take it. So Shiuzo was ready to change his body shape at any time and keep an eye on Ron's movements. As long as Ron couldn't escape from his attack limit in an instant, he had 100 ways to make him lie down. However, he never considered that Ron would use the underground passage to distance himself from the opponent, one on top and the other below, forming a horizontal deviation. This made all his prepared backhands useless, and his punch hit Cotton, causing him to vomit blood in pain. At the first moment, Shiuzo, who had a shiny bronze complexion, thought that Ron had known the information about the test site in advance and had deliberately pretended to be suspicious to deceive him, and he became furious. "How dare you play tricks on me, you bastard! ZZ!" The angry Shiuzo was about to jump down the tunnel to chase after him when suddenly there was dazzling lightning, the air became extremely dry, and the strong electric current made Shiuzo's scalp numb. "Nanny!" Shiuzo looked down and saw that in the pit where Ron fell, violent thunder was gathering rapidly. A faint blue light could be seen and a foul smell was coming. Shiuzo's observation haki quickly warned him, and without thinking, he kicked his foot. Shave! Swish! The moment he left his original position and his feet were floating in the air, a violent pillar of thunder burst out, burning the corner of his clothes black. The sky blue lightning burned the soil and steel, and exploded into the sky with unmatched force. 10 million volts! Lightning pillar! Storm! In the underground passage, Ron howled to the sky, thunder exploded and lightning flashed around him. A dazzling column of lightning rushed out from his body, like an inverted thunderbolt, piercing the sky. But this move was too slow to launch. A second before he made the move, Shiuzo had already left the spot. Apart from a slight numbness, it was meaningless. Boom! Pulling some distance, Xiuzhou stood up calmly and extinguished the burning corner of his clothes. It's powerful, but too slow. You need to increase your release speed, you little rascal. Even though Ron is a powerful user of the thunder fruit, Xiuzhou still has some strength left, and commented on Ron with a relaxed look on his face. This is also a fighting skill, which shows strength with a leisurely and relaxed posture, creates psychological pressure on the opponent, and forces the opponent to make mistakes. Common name, pretending to be cool. It's just that Ron didn't make a mistake, Xiuzhou made a mistake first. Now is not the time to show off, because he is not sure of the surrounding environment. If it was on a real battlefield, or if Ron was stronger, Xiuzhou's mistake would be fatal. In the stands, Kizaru shook his head slightly, tisk tisk. Brigadier General Xiuzhou is still so reckless. How did the teacher teach him? If I were him, I wouldn't say so much nonsense. Well, Instructor Xiuzhou was careless, but the gap in strength is too big, so it's not a big deal. Ron's idea was good. I didn't expect him to use the power of the fruit so well. Since it was about Zifa, Tryon awkwardly changed the subject. Then he looked up at the sky, at the lightning rolling down, and took a deep breath. This scene is really spectacular. Yeah, it's really worthy of being called the thunder fruit, so terrifying. The lightning column lasted less than a second, but the attack it brought was not over. In the sky, countless lightning arrows broke away from the light column, dense as rain, accompanied by deafening and terrifying thunder, pouring down. This is a thunderstorm, there is no escape. Suddenly I found that the registration code of the software Dashin code was bound to the motherboard information. I couldn't use it at all after changing the computer. What made Dashu even more speechless was that when I moved the hard drive of the old computer here, I subconsciously chose to format it. So, 5 chapters of drafts were left. 15,000 words. Gone. End of this chapter. Chapter 14, Guess the time of defeat? Chapter 14, Guess the time of defeat? Xiuzhou, who was performing alone, noticed the attack from behind from the displacement of his own shadow. He turned around in bewilderment and immediately said, "Oh my God!" A torrential rainstorm came down from the sky, covering almost half of the test site. Xiuzhou didn't want to bear the shame of being an instructor who was hit by a recruit, even if it was the thunder fruit. His observation haki was fully activated, and he moved quickly, dancing like a butterfly under the thunder and rain. Although he was tall and strong like an ox, he moved lightly and gracefully, as if he was a different person. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder fell to the ground and drums exploded. The seemingly wide-ranging intensive attack did not cause any damage to Xiuzhou. This was the terrifying power of observation haki. After waiting for the thunder to dissipate, Xiuzhou stood on the sandy ground covered with scorch pits, took a breath, and a cross appeared on his forehead. Damn you brat! He thought it would be a one-sided fight, but he didn't expect that after Ron dodged his attack, he caused him a lot of trouble. As an instructor, how could he not be angry? Even if I admire you, that will be after the battle is over. The focus now is only on fighting. Don't think you're safe hiding underground. I know the terrain better than you do. Xiuzhou snorted angrily, looked around, and immediately found an entrance to the underground passage. He ran over and raised his fist. Bang! He easily broke the fragile soil layer with one punch, and Xiuzhou jumped down and landed in the steel passage. Suddenly, he found a ray of light flashing at the corner in front of him, and immediately sneered, "I caught you. Stop right there." After saying that, he took a step forward, used the 6 styles of the navy, and followed closely. The underground passage was made entirely of metal, blocked on all sides, with only upward openings in different areas for people to enter and exit. In addition, the soil used as camouflage on the outside had a strong barrier property, and except for Ron, who had a lightning constitution, who could sense the general situation through radio waves, ordinary observation haki could not penetrate. In the stands, Kizaru and Tryon, having lost their target, retracted their gaze. Ron's performance was unexpected and brilliant. As a new recruit, he was able to make Brigadier General Shiuzo suffer a loss, which was unprecedented. But as Tryon said, the gap in hard power between the two sides is like a chasm. Ron's defeat is inevitable. It is only a matter of time. So Kizaru asked. You say, how long will Ron resist? Well, this. At most 1 or 2 minutes. Tryon thought for a moment and speculated, Ron's lightning can't cause effective damage to Brigadier General Shiuzo, and it consumes a lot of physical strength. If he tries to attack, Brigadier General Shiuzo will easily seize the opportunity. It is a fact that even though he is known as the strongest errand soldier and has left a legend on the Garp ship, Ron's thunderous strength is still there. Shiuzo's strength is not inferior to that of an ordinary lieutenant general, and is only a hair's breadth away from being a lieutenant general of the headquarters. However, he has been in charge of the recruit camp for the past few years, and his military achievements are not enough, so he has remained at the rank of brigadier general. Flying Squirrel has become a representative figure among the lieutenant generals of the headquarters, and Shiuzo, who is his peer and regarded as Zephyr's right-hand man, must not be much worse. As long as he uses his armament haki to cover and resist, Ron can't hurt Shiuzo at all. But if Ron hides and seeks in the narrow underground passage at the speed of lightning, Shiuzo won't be able to catch him, right? Kizaru said slowly, then looked towards the quiet testing field. 5 minutes. If we can't tell the result, there's no need to continue. Indeed. Tryon nodded, approving of the timing. However, he looked at the test field hesitantly, feeling that something was wrong. Playing hide and seek in the underground passage at the speed of lightning? That Ron? What kind of international joke are you kidding? Based on his understanding of Ron, the current situation was too abnormal. This madman Ron never gave in, and even dared to punch Garp on the ship. Even if he found that his lightning could not do anything to Shiuzo, he would still attack without hesitation until he was defeated and fell to the ground. But what happens now? He fled underground, and there has been no thunder until now, which means that Ron is really playing hide and seek with Shiuzo under the cover of the steel passage, just as Kizaru said. Being so afraid of fighting and running away is not the Ron he knows. Unless... Thinking of a certain speculation, Tryon was speechless and shook his head. How can it be? No matter how talented Ron is, he is just a rookie. As a veteran with decades of experience, how could Shiuzo fail in such a disaster? He didn't have any hidden cards, and the whole process of his becoming stronger was right under their noses. Knowing himself and the enemy, Tryon couldn't think of any possibility. That's right. This was so contrary to his usual style that Tryon felt that Ron was setting up a big plan. Because he want to win. A rookie wants to defeat the battle-hardened Brigadier General Shiuzo. Simply whimsical. While Tryon was laughing at his idea, Ron had already made all the arrangements underground. If he knew what Tryon was thinking, he would definitely give him a thumbs up and show his 8 shining front teeth. Oh, that's good. If Tryon knew what Ron was thinking, he would definitely burst into laughter and point at his nose. Are you still sleepy today? Indeed, judging from the attack just now, Ron knew that the possibility of him defeating Shiuzo was almost zero. The opponent only showed ordinary melee skills, and forced him to flee in embarrassment. The strength of the two sides was not at the same level at all. But defeat and win over are not the same thing. Ron is confident that he can defeat Shiuzo, but not beat him. Well, the premise is that he can lead the beast behind him into the cage, which requires a bit of acting skills. While running frantically, Shiuzo roared and pointed his finger forward, finger gun Lien Xing. Boom! 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 Densely packed finger gun gas bullets were fired from Shiuzo's fingers, with a terrifying power that was enough to leave pits on steel. In the narrow area of the underground passage, Ron had no place to dodge the covering attack. Although he could not attach domineering power, each attack would penetrate Ron, causing him to waste his energy to heal his body. Obviously, Xiuzhou saw Ron's previous weakness. As the person in charge of the test site, his eyesight was extremely sharp. The common weakness of new soldiers is physical strength and endurance, which is very different from that of veterans. This is especially true for Ron, who has just obtained the Thunder Fruit for a month. Even the slightest healing will continue to drain his physical strength, not to mention that he cannot perfectly control lightning. After being broken up, his physical strength is greatly lost. Water accumulates into abysses and soil piles into mountains. If Ron continues to fight, defeat is the only outcome. Once again being dispersed by the finger gun gas bullet, Ron condensed his body speechlessly, his mouth twitching. Monster! Won't he get tired? How many times has this happened? I feel tired just looking at it. Finger gun, Starlink. Seeing Ron regroup, Xiuzhou fired countless gas bullets like crazy, hitting the steel plate with bangs. Ron tried his best to dodge, but was still hit by the gas bullets, and his physical strength was rapidly lost. Suddenly, Ron noticed a crack in the corner of the wall. Is it finally here? He immediately became alert, and his speed increased again as the thunder shot out. Xiuzhou behind him saw this scene and thought that Ron wanted to distance himself and escape, so he immediately accelerated to catch up. Don't try to escape. There were many bends in the underground, and no matter how fast thunder was, he still needed to turn. As long as he was not pulled down, Xiuzhou was confident that he could bite Ron. For a moment, the two moved quickly and soon came to a seemingly normal passage. Lightning flashed at the corner, and Xiuzhou rushed out angrily, then he immediately braked and looked at Ron who had stopped to rest in front of him, confused and puzzled. His intuition told him that there was danger. Chapter 15, Deception is the Key to Victory. In the dim underground passage, the air was hot and stuffy, and you couldn't see your hand in front of you. The electric current in Ron's hand was the only light source here, allowing the two to look at each other. Looking around, unable to find an ambush, Xiuzhou frowned and shouted, "What do you want to do?" "By the way, Brigadier General Xiuzhou, right?" Ron leaned his hands against the metal wall, leaning forward and breathing heavily as the lightning flashed. "Anyway, you won't be able to catch up with me in a short while, so why not just pass this test?" Ron was exhausted from the previous chase, and the increased strength he put in now almost drained him out. "You pass? Is that what you mean?" Xiuzhou was stunned at first, then he understood. Indeed, he almost forgot that this was a targeted test and he didn't have to defeat Ron. He was very angry just now, but now that he came to his senses, Ron's performance was already perfect. Know your strengths and weaknesses, and only use your strengths to restrain yourself. Even if there are sly people who know the intelligence in advance, it is because the other party has done a good job in intelligence work. As a soldier, never make excuses. Xiuzhou knows this truth very well. Yeah, it's just a test. Ron leaned against the wall and smiled. Tell me honestly, based on my current performance, how many points can I get? Let me think about it. It is our duty and we have no choice but to do it. After hearing this, Xiuzhou thought about this question seriously. He was the main person in charge of the test site of the new recruit camp. He was known for his strictness and rarely gave high scores. But he couldn't deliberately make things difficult for Ron's performance today. Just like Ron said, follow your conscience. I think the actual combat score should be good chance. Seeing Xiuzhou distracted, Ron's eyes lit up in an instant, and the electricity in his hands was no longer hidden, bursting out completely. Suddenly, there was a flash of lightning in the passage, and a continuous piercing buzzing sound. Xiuzhou looked up blankly, thinking, "Aren't you asking for ratings? What do you want to do again?" Without the time to deal with him, Ron gathered lightning with both hands and shouted, "Lay Yetai!" This was something Ron could have done a long time ago. He had never been exposed before. He used metal to interfere with the pursuit in order to hide himself, just like the fangs in the mouth of a venomous snake, waiting for the opportunity to inject the deadly venom into the body of the prey and defeat the enemy. He really wanted to win, because he couldn't. This is the true meaning of challenging yourself, to do something you cannot do. Rumble. Under Xiuzou's stunned gaze, suddenly, the steel around him that had never moved since it was made twisted and began to wriggle as if it had life. The iron blocks from all directions wrapped around the lightning python, and the terrifying high temperature turned them into gelatinous molten iron, approaching him little by little. Instantly, he was covered in steel in all directions. The heavy steel was like a cage, trapping him in place. At the same time, the steel was still shrinking, squeezing his range of movement. Fuck! Xiuzou was suddenly horrified and had to prop himself up, leaving fingerprints on the red-hot steel, in order to create some space for himself to move. But in this way, more steel took the opportunity to rush in and fill up the spaces that he could not take care of. Gradually, the blue light began to dim, the gap between him and Ron was shrinking, and the cage was about to be completed. Looking up, through the last tiny gap, Xiuzou found that Ron had inserted his hands into the steel without any concealment. As the thunder exploded, his lips turned pale and he was sweating profusely, which showed that he was physically exhausted, but the smile on his face was so hateful. Asshole! Xiuzou didn't realize that he was being played a trick. He was filled with anger and domineering aura, and punched towards the face. However, he was a step too slow, the steel had already closed, and the punch hit the thick steel wall. Boom! The dull bell echoed in the quiet underground passage, and the dust continued to fall. Ron was shaken and fell to the ground, shrinking his head and covering his ears. After a long while, when the vibration disappeared, he had time to look back and looked at the raised fist mark on the steel ball, smacking his lips. It was a close call. Fortunately, I prepared enough steel in advance. In the square tunnel, the soil was completely exposed, and the steel that was originally attached to it melted into a ball, forming a steel ball that wrapped around Xiuzou. All the underground steel within a radius of 20 square meters was pulled over by him. This was really not an easy job. Xiuzou thought he had chased Ron into a panic, but in fact, every path was within Ron's calculation. He deliberately chose a passage that was normal to lead Xiuzou forward. The rest of the places had been transformed by Ron when Xiuzou was hiding from the thunderstorm outside. As a Thunder Man, the steel passage was like a maze game with cheats turned on for him. The passage was dark and Xiuzou could not remember it sometimes, but Ron would never. However, the thunderstorm lasted too short a time and the work was not completed completely, so Ron had to choose a path and continue construction during the chase, using the heat from the lightning to melt the wall. With all his attention focused on Ron, Xiuzou didn't notice that except for the road he passed by, the steel in other places was constantly melting and deforming. The underground passage, which was made of pure steel and had excellent thermal and electrical conductivity and was dim and dark, provided Ron with a perfect environment to cause trouble. The gap in the last corner was left intentionally by Ron. Arriving at that position meant that he had completed all the preparations and was only waiting to be activated. Then, bang! Thunder and lightning were raging in the gravel field. Ron rushed out from underground, leaned his back against the steel ball that was exposed above the soil, and sat down on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of muffled drums and bells continued to ring in his ears, shaking him. He immediately turned around and inserted his hand into the steel ball, using the last bit of his physical strength to use the high temperature of lightning to continuously heal the cracks caused by Xiuzou's smash. You have to do this. The other party is simply a monster. The iron ball, which was more than 3 meters thick, began to crack under the punches and was about to break out of the cage. That is the fist of a mortal being. Not a pile driver. And this is under the premise that the space is limited and the distance for punching is not enough. If he hadn't been physically exhausted and unable to continue, he would have really wrapped Xiu Zhou tightly in steel, leaving him no room to move. But even so, the final result is already determined. The high temperature of the melting steel will quickly consume the oxygen inside. In addition, the high temperature will also increase Xiuzou's demand for oxygen. The internal space is not sufficient and the oxygen is insufficient. Soon he will faint from lack of oxygen and will no longer be energetic. Xiuzou's strength is evident from the fact that he was able to punch so many times with such great force in a small area, in an oxygen-deficient or even oxygen-free environment, and break the steel ball. Regarding Ron's cruel method, Kizaru pondered for 2 seconds in the stands and said, "This Ron, is very unique." As one of the people standing on a high place and watching the whole process, he could clearly see the long steel plates extending from the ground little by little, and at a certain moment they suddenly moved towards the center and finally covered the area. As expected, that's where Xiuzou is. The muffled drum sound in his ears gradually weakened, from earth-shaking to inaudible, and one could imagine what Xiuzou had encountered. At this result, Tryon's mouth twitched, and he smiled with his lips but not his eyes. Ha, ha ha ha, indeed, it's very unique. What the hell? This little brat is going to make a big fuss. Chapter 16 Headquarters is shocked. What? You said Ron defeated Xiuzou at the testing ground. In the marshal's office, Zhang Guo slammed the table and stood up, his eyes wide open. Do you know what the consequences are for lying about military intelligence? I know, Marshal. But... The messenger almost cried, this is true. God knows how a new soldier defeated the commander of the headquarters, General Xiuzou. He was a real powerful man. As a member of the new soldier camp, the messenger had received training under Xiuzou, so he knew how terrifying that monster was. However, that's what happened. The instructor of the recruit camp, Lieutenant General Tryon of Garp, and Admiral Kizaru all agreed with this result. Brigadier General Xiuzou is still receiving oxygen in the infirmary. After the news was reported, he confirmed again and again that it was not hallucination before rushing in to report in a panic. Hiss, how did he do that? Give me the report. Zhang Guo took a deep breath, took the information, and waved away his left and right. Before he returned to his seat, Zhang Guo keenly smelled an extremely strong murderous aura and immediately turned around. With his mouth twitching in silence, Zhang Guo looked at the sturdy old man with sunglasses and thick purple hair sitting on the seat. The dark aura behind him was visible to the naked eye, as fierce as a ghost. After thinking for 3 seconds, he decided not to ask about it and moved away silently. Sitting back in his seat, Zhang Guo distributed the information. The timing is quite coincidental. We just said that we can adjourn the meeting, everyone take a look and give your opinions. After saying that, Zhang Guo held up the paper and looked at the report with the same curiosity. The first is a simple physical fitness test. Single arm maximum strength, 400 catties. Just barely passable, even a little unqualified. Zhang Guo frowned slightly, gave his evaluation, and then looked at the next item. 8.5 meter speed, seconds. Same evaluation as above. 5000 m weighted run, 19 minutes. The evaluation continues as above. Attack strength, 60 Dao power. Evaluate. Just looking at these items, Zhang Guo felt that the news of Xiuzou's defeat was ridiculous. How could such a small figure defeat Xiuzou? The two sides were simply one in heaven and one on earth. Brigadier General Xiuzou has a DM value of close to 4,000. He can knock a sea king weighing hundreds of tons into the air with his immense strength. His 3-meter speed is less than seconds, which is faster than ordinary 6-style users. He also masters dual-color haki and has rich combat experience. He is considered the strongest instructor in the Marine recruit camp, second only to Zephyr. He is the Superman among supermen. Ron's physical test data showed that he was just an ordinary man who was a little stronger. His Dao power value was at most 50, so it was impossible for him to defeat Xiu Zhou head-on. The colonel in charge of statistics also gave a fair score. Comprehensive evaluation, 50 Daoli, pass. If you fail, you will go back to where you came from. The headquarters recruit camp only accepts geniuses and strong people. Soldiers with an ordinary Dao force value of 10 are not qualified to enter the headquarters recruit camp for training. The King Yun Shortcut Headquarters Recruit Camp, where the rank of major starts after graduation, has strict requirements as it should be. However, the following data from the fruit ability test surprised Sengoku a little. Lightning attack strength, 228 Dao force. Lightning 2.5 meter sprint, seconds. Actual test, full score. Overall rating, 80/100. Dao power value is a special term defined by the world government to reflect a person's combat effectiveness, but it cannot completely determine a person's strength. After all, there are too many things that affect victory or defeat in actual combat, so it can only be used as a reference. Since this is a rule set by the world government, its intelligence agency Cypher Paul and the Navy headquarters are all using it, so Sengoku knows very well what it means for Ron to be able to attack with a 50 Dao force with a physical fitness of 228 Dao force. This is a pervert who has used 4.5 times his own strength. Since it represents combat effectiveness, the Dao force value of a well-trained Navy soldier is 10, so the maximum attack he can make is also 10. So in theory, Ron's normal attack Dao force value is only around 50. The fact that he could previously make an attack force of 60 Dao force was already proof that he had surpassed his physical limit. In their minds, Ron had just obtained the Thunder Fruit a month ago, and in terms of the fruit's ability, being able to launch an attack of 50 to 100 Dao power was already impressive enough. Unexpectedly, 228. 4 times his own strength. It completely refreshed their cognition. Lightning is indeed powerful, but such an extraordinary value cannot be wiped out by the advantage of a fruit. This is genius. He has a terrifying talent for the Thunder Fruit. Looking at this number, everyone in the room was shocked and exclaimed in admiration. It's amazing. Sakazuki was a few years older than Ron back then. He only scored around 240 in the first test, right? And it's only twice. Yet, I remember that Borsellino's Dao power was 270, and Kuzan only had 200. The current 3 admirals are all users of natural abilities, and they all came from the recruit camp, so it is inevitable that they are compared to each other. Although Kuzan scored a high score of 200 which was 3 times his own Dao power, holding the ice cube that had no lethality in the early stage, Ron was much younger than the 3 men at the time of the first test, and 4 times younger. Given time, his achievements will be unimaginable. While the others were expressing their shock, Cap, sitting in his seat, was puzzled. No. What's going on? How can a little demon who discharges electricity and polishes his body all day long have such a high degree of fruit development? On the way back, Cap knew exactly what Ron was doing all day long, but he couldn't understand how Ron managed to achieve such amazing numbers. Could it be that he practiced without telling me? This bastard kid! Carp felt that he had discovered the truth and was immediately filled with hatred. I'm going to find out tonight. Afterwards, Raiden's 100-meter dash result. No one cared about that number. With the speed of lightning, running 2.5 meters in 0.3 seconds is considered slow. The record set by Kizaru in the recruit camp was seconds. For the Pika Pika Nomi and the Thunder Nomi, the value of this value is not to test their speed. No matter how fast ordinary people move, can they compare with lightning? That makes absolutely no sense. Is it necessary to test the speed which is already at the top? If we change it to a simple speed test, and let Kizaru go now, there will be no time interval at all. He can arrive in an instant, exceeding the reaction limit of the test device. When Ron learns Enel's move of teleporting in the electromagnetic field, there will be no time interval either. Therefore, this value mainly reflects how fast they release the power of the fruit, as well as their ability to capture targets with dynamic vision while moving at high speed, and conducts an overall test of the coordination between the use of the fruit and the coordination of the body. The 100-meter race in the test field is not as simple as rushing through. You must stay in the designated area to count as a score. The recruit camp does not teach observation haki, and before it awakens on its own, you can only use your eyesight to locate. As you can imagine, in the 2.5 seconds, in addition to the time he wasted transforming into a lightning move at the moment of departure, Ron must have slowed down to determine his position, which was discovered by the sharp-eyed instructor, who directly deducted 20 points. Otherwise, this time must have been around 1 second, and he could have scored 100 points. Finally, there is the actual combat test with full marks. Ahem, let's see how he, defeats Shozo, right? To calm the atmosphere, Zhangguo coughed dryly and glanced at someone quietly. As soon as the voice fell, Zifa, who was still in awe a second ago, immediately fell down and snorted coldly, "Don't watch it." To put it nicely, Shozo was careless and underestimated the enemy. To put it bluntly, he was stupid. A monstrous black aura rose up, and Zifa stood up with his face as black as oil. "Look, I'm going to give him a good beating when I get back." As Xiuzo's mentor, Xiuzo was also a disciple he favored. As soon as he got the information, Zifa scanned the details of the battle. After finding out that Shozo was fooled by his opponent and was finally defeated by being suffocated by an iron ball, Zifa's anger almost burst out. He was furious. If this wasn't the marshal's office and the meeting hadn't officially ended, he would have rushed out to pull Shozo up from the hospital bed and sent him to Hell Island for further training. "Calm down." Zhangguo comforted him dryly, but noticing Zifa's eyes, he knew that it was useless to say more. So he mourned in his heart for a second, turned his head, and looked at the woman beside him who was hunched over, with a frown on her face, but her eyes were full of wisdom. What do you think?" "Not bad." The Chief of Staff of the Navy headquarters and a legend in the eyes of all female soldiers, the goddess that this group of people pursued when they were young, Vice Admiral Tsuru exclaimed in admiration without caring about Zifa's feelings. This is a classic case of the weak defeating the strong, worthy of inclusion in textbooks. I recommend that the textbooks be revised immediately to let those kids in the military academy who complain about being tired all day long know what it means to persevere and win. He gave a high evaluation in his first sentence, and even proposed to revise the teaching materials. However, no one had any objection to this, because if they were in their shoes, they would not be able to achieve a more perfect record than Ron. He took a calm breath, picked up the information, looked at Ron in the photo kindly, and said, "No matter how strong the enemy is, he is still a human being and needs oxygen to breathe. This is a well-known weakness. But how easy is it to take advantage of it? At least for me, I can't think of any way. But Ron is different. I guess he had an idea immediately after he discovered the existence of the underground steel. So he first angered Shozo and dragged him into the steel passage environment which was more favorable to him, using speed to contain him. Then he slowly laid out the plan, without exposing Lei Yeti's ability, and led Shozo into the trap step by step. Finally, even if he was exhausted, he had to keep the iron ball from breaking, waiting for Shozo to suffocate and faint to win. With such flexible thinking, decisive judgment, and tenacious character, I have to say, Garp, you have done a rare good thing. Tsuru-chan, what do you mean? Garp immediately blew his nose and glared, looking at Vice Admiral Tsuru unwillingly. I've been through life and death for so many years, isn't that a good thing? In response, Vice Admiral Tsuru didn't even look at him and just uttered a name. Flower City. Cap suddenly, wilted at a speed visible to the naked eye, sat back in his seat without saying a word, and vented his anger on the donut in his hand. Ahem, no matter what, it is an established fact that Ron defeated Xiu Zhou. Zhang Guo stepped forward and concluded, from now on, his training will be handed over to Zifa. We must ensure that he grows in all aspects and not leave any loopholes. 4 months later, it all depends on him. Although Zifa was angry about Xiu Zhou's defeat, he certainly would not vent his anger on Ron. On the contrary, he liked this seedling very much and cultivated him with a strong sense of mission. Understand? Nodding, Zhang Guo slapped the table and continued, also, strengthen the defense and search for any traces of Baroque works. Since they dared to strike once, there will definitely be a second and third time. Smash them to death on the Grand Line. I don't want to hear about the same situation happening in the Four Seas and the New World. Do you understand? Yes. No matter how good the relationship is, Zhang Guo is still a marshal. The three of them stood up at the same time and saluted in unison. P.S. The protagonist is a character created by the author's alter ego. To praise him is to praise yourself. In the past, Dasha never understood how to express the supporting character's admiration for the protagonist. Recently, when communicating with a great god, he got this great sentence, and suddenly he was enlightened. Before I knew it, I had praised myself for 3,000 words. Oh, how shameful! Chapter 17 BW Dormitory Bullying. The Alabasta incident took place in 1520, 6 years ago. But before the 3-year drought and the rise of rebellions, Baroque works had already existed. From a god's perspective, all One Piece fans know who the person behind the scenes is. Before Roger became the Pirate King, more than 20 years ago, the 7 Warlords of the Sea system was established to curb the increasingly rampant pirate activities on the sea. One of the first 7 Warlords of the Sea is now the national hero of Alabasta, a natural sand fruit user, nicknamed Sand Crocodile and Sir Crocodile. After failing to challenge Whitebeard, Crocodile went to Alabasta to attack Pluto based on clues in order to find the power to defeat Whitebeard. He then accepted the government's call and became one of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. He used this as a cover to establish the Baroque secret society. With the support of the 7 Warlords of the Sea, although Baroque works cannot be seen in the open, its development is still frighteningly fast. Previously, they had been engaged in assassination and arms trading as their main activities. They never intentionally helped pirates or interfered in the internal affairs of a country. They honestly played the role of a member of the dark world for the purpose of making money. The Navy has tried to seize the information from them several times but has not received any significant returns. In addition, due to pressure from corrupt government officials who have taken advantage of the situation, the information has long been thrown into a corner and gathered dust. But today, in the year 1514 of the Haiwan calendar, the Baroque workshop made a surprising move. They got involved in the internal disputes of West Island, the flower capital, which is one of the member countries of the world government. Due to the special nature of Hwaju itself, after receiving the call for help, Sengoku ordered Garp to go over there, but he didn't expect that he would be sent back halfway. The world government doesn't care about the internal affairs of the member states, so it's better for the Navy not to interfere. Those were the words of Fred, the nephew of the Queen of Flora and the General of Flora who held great power over the army. After careful consideration, Garp resisted the urge and returned the same way. His failure was that his whereabouts were exposed and he failed to contact the Queen first. As long as the Queen expressed her welcome, the mission would be a sure thing, and it would not be Ron's turn at all. Similarly, as long as someone in the Flower City expressed diswelcome, Garp would have to bow to the regulations of the world government. Fortunately, the appearance of the Navy hero is of great significance. The other side was concerned about the Navy's iron fist, so they paused their actions and chose to wait and see the situation. But this move could not last long, and no one could be sure if it dragged on. The Navy's only chance was to enter Hwaju under a legitimate name on the Queen's 70th birthday 4 months later. Jean Guo has already made a decision to let Garp lead the team to visit, and Ron will follow the ship. In addition to finding out the true face of Baroque works, this is also a test for Ron. This is not a simple multiple-choice question. How Ron will judge is very important to the Navy and the warring states. Of course Ron didn't know all this at the moment. The afternoon test had exhausted him. Led by the instructor, he came to the barracks for new recruits where he would be staying for an unknown period of time. 301, this is the room. Listening to the noise coming from behind the door, Ron put his hand on the door handle and pushed it open. Swish! Hearing the noise, the recruits inside immediately fell silent and looked over in unison. This was the simplest dormitory for recruits, with 10 people in one room. The air was filled with foot odor, sweat, and cigarette smoke, and dirty clothes were everywhere, making it as messy as a pigsty. There is not enough space in the headquarters to provide a separate room for each recruit. If you want to live in a clean and tidy big house, then let your performance speak for itself. At the same time, this can motivate people and make the recruits work hard to practice. As a newcomer, Ron was qualified to apply for a separate room because he could defeat Xiuzhou. But even if the news was announced, few new recruits would be convinced. In the recruit camp, almost everyone is a genius among geniuses, but even they were beaten by Xiuzhou's unique testing method. You said you defeated Instructor Xiuzhou, but your physique is not as good as that of ordinary recruits. Why? At that time, there will be an endless stream of challengers and we will not be able to handle them all. Thinking about the trouble he would have to waste a lot of time training to deal with challengers in the future, Ron immediately accepted Tryon's suggestion and moved into the big dormitory. Anyway, there was only a month left before the year-end evaluation, and by then he could win people over with virtue and live in a big house safely. Then, Ron ignored the gazes of others, looked at the empty bed closest to the door, and threw the luggage assigned to him by the instructor onto it. Snapped! A hand quickly reached over from the other side of the bed and knocked the luggage away. Then, the recruits sneered and murmured. Again, new recruits? The instructors really won't give up. Hey, what do you think he will do? Of course I was not convinced, and then I was beaten up by Zoro. What Ron didn't know was that dormitory 301 had been holding 9 people for a long time, and whenever a new person wanted to move in, they would be bullied by Zoro. In the end, he could only run to the instructor in tears to have the dormitory rearranged. They have seen this process many times and are already familiar with it. As expected, seeing his luggage being thrown off the bed, Ron raised his head and asked expressionlessly, "What do you mean?" It started. Quick! I'm the banker, buy and leave." The others immediately became lively and excitedly started gambling. For them, this was one of the only pleasures left in their boring training life. There was a man lying on the empty bed. He was not wearing a navy uniform, but only a white t-shirt. He had dark skin and looked to be in his 20s. When he heard the question, he raised the cigarette butt in his hand, without raising his head, and answered without sincerity. "Sorry, this is my ashtray, please change seats. There are already 9 people living in this dormitory. What do you want to change seats to?" Ron turned around quietly and looked at the others. "What are you looking at? You want to fight? There is no place for you here, get out. That's it. Get out." Since it had only been less than a few hours since Ron defeated Xiuzhou, the group of new recruits had no way of knowing about it, so they relied on their prestige as seniors and made a commotion, wanting to see Ron's helpless look. But to their disappointment, Ron remained calm throughout the whole process. Not to mention being at a loss, he didn't even show the slightest bit of nervousness. After a while of noise, the others who were having fun gradually realized that something was wrong and slowly shut up. "What's the situation? Is this person born with a lack of emotion?" Someone was about to speak, but Ron got there first. Hey! Trouble! He sighed, looked back at the recruit named Zoro on the upper bunk, and said calmly, "I'll give you 3 seconds to get down and apologize." What? A group of recruits looked at Ron in shock, unable to believe their ears. Is this guy a fool? That's Zoro, one of the 100 strong men in the recruit camp. The Dao power value is as high as 300. How dare you ask him to apologize? Immediately, a group of people burst into laughter. This is terrible. Zoro, someone told you to get down and apologize. Ha 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 ha, this is so funny. This is really the most interesting thing this year. Who's going to call a doctor? No one's going to get killed. Not to mention them, even the guy named Zoro himself was very surprised. He stood up and looked at Ron in surprise. "Brother, how dare you talk to me like this? Don't you know who I am? Time up." Before he could finish, Ron interrupted him rudely. The contempt contained in the 3 words "time is up" made Zoro extremely angry. He clenched his fists and sneered, "It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't be honest. Beat him, Zoro. I bought you 500 Baileys. Come on, little brother. I support you. Ha ha ha. You've almost lost all your pants. Still gambling." This was an unequal battle, at least in the eyes of the recruits. But coincidentally, in Ron's eyes, the same was true. Teach me a lesson? Are you sure? ZZ. The sky blue lightning python spread over his body, slowly coiling, and poked its head out from behind Ron's shoulder, staring at the others fiercely. The air was filled with the smell of ozone, and the numbing feeling brought by the dazzling thunder so close made the recruits feel like a drake with its throat strangled. The sound stopped abruptly and they stared at Ron. Zoro, who had just gotten out of bed, looked at him in shock, his mouth trembling. "Natural devil fruit. Nonsense. Am I using love to generate electricity?" With a cold snort, Ron raised his right foot and stomped it hard. Under the horrified gaze of the recruits, the thunder python rushed into the ground and turned into countless small snakes as thick as arms, spreading in all directions. Thunder python walk on the ground. Sizzle! Sizzle! For a moment, Dormitory 301 and its surrounding dormitories were filled with electric lights and blue light. Yesterday, after finishing typing and playing World of Warcraft, a message popped up on the World channel: "Big guys, I accidentally went back to the novice village after Hearthstone. How do I get back to the new world?" World of Warcraft players should know that now there is a direct upgrade service. Newbies rarely know the map, so they just need to follow the quests. So when I saw this message, I replied as if possessed by a ghost: "Go to the sea and find Fishman Island. The new world is just past it. More excitement is coming." ADK immediately added, "Go to AG Wisdom Valley and teleport to Vashoy IR. Go east in the sea trench and you will reach Fishman Island." Then a wizard said, "Otherwise, go to Haishan, and you will reach Mary Geosa after crossing the top of the mountain." I don't know what happened afterwards, but I know that if I really did that, the newbie would definitely doubt life. It's all bad silver. Chapter 18: The Dormitory Manager with a Strong Desire to Survive. When the recruit dormitory manager arrived at the scene, he saw a mess. The walls and floor, which were not very clean to begin with, were now even darker, with burn marks everywhere. On the ceiling, all the light bulbs had exploded, leaving a large pool of debris. On the bed, sparks were ignited from the quilt, and were gradually spreading. On the ground, the new soldiers were lying in all directions, their hair was messy, and they were spewing black smoke from their mouths. The administrator thought about this and touched his chin. "Sure enough, is there a short circuit in the wires?" Puff. The administrator's first sentence made this group of people collectively vomit blood. "You are always blind. Can such destruction be caused by a short circuit in the wires?" However, he seemed to be completely unaware of this, shaking his fist in indignation and saying, I've told the higher UPS that the equipment in the recruit dormitory is old and needs to be replaced, but they didn't believe me. Maybe we should just replace it together this time. New recruits. While the others were speechless, Ron saw a hint of shock and fear in the administrator's eyes. He knew of his existence and saw that the destruction here was caused by him, but for some reason, he chose to turn a blind eye. It can be said that the desire to survive is quite strong. Faced with such a reasonable dormitory manager, Ron stood behind the administrator and silently dispersed the thunder that was about to attack. This is the headquarters of the Navy, it is better to know the rules. The friction between recruits can be prevaricated with excuses, but if the recruits are against the dormitory manager, it will be a serious problem. It's definitely not because I'm afraid of some idle hero in the Navy. You guys should clean up the mess you made. We can change the light bulbs tomorrow. After saying that, the dormitory manager walked out of the room without looking back and wanted to close the door. Bang dang! The screws of the wooden door fell off and it fell down all of a sudden. The corners of his mouth twitched a few times, and the dormitory manager turned around and left without looking around. After disappearing from the door, Ron heard the sound of hurried footsteps dong, 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 quickly moving away from this place. What a talent! After the dormitory manager, who had a strong desire to survive, left, Ron squatted down, took out a cigarette box from the pocket of the black man who was suspected to be Zorro, and selected a cigarette with fewer burn marks. Click! Electricity burst out from his index finger and thumb, lighting a fire with thunder. Then, he sat on the bed and took a deep breath. Hiss! It's really powerful, worthy of being from the world of One Piece. Biting his cigarette, Ron looked at the recruit who had fallen to the ground and raised his eyebrows. Dormitory bullying? It's quite interesting, isn't it? The amazing thing is that even though Ron had an unusual physique and was big and strong since he was a child, he had never been a member of the school bully. Because, compared to bullying the little brats in the same grade, he preferred to bully the hooligans who blocked the school gate to collect protection fees. After all, adults are more resilient than children. So dormitory bullying is something new to him. After hearing these words, the recruits who had been showing off just now burst into tears and wanted to speak. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. The tingling pain had not dissipated. His body was out of control. When he opened his mouth, the remaining lightning spread and coiled between his upper and lower lips. It was extremely stimulating. As the focus of care, Zorro's tongue was curled up and he couldn't even speak clearly. But his eyes were full of reluctance, and he glared at Ron viciously. After all, he was a little Superman with 300 Deo strength. The lightning had great destructive power, but it was not enough to beat him into a state of temper. It was just that his body was numb and he had no strength to resist. This shows that the Thunder Fruit's reputation as the strongest natural element is not groundless. Even though his dharmic power is only 1/6 of Zorro's, without the armament haki to enhance his defense, the destructive power of the electric current on the human body alone is enough to allow Ron to fight against opponents of higher levels. But Ron didn't like this look. So, as the recruits watched in horror, he opened his big hands, grabbed Zorro's hair and lifted him up. ZZ. What if someone is not convinced? Keep beating me. Ron's ideas were always simple. An hour later, Carp arrived in front of the dormitory. By the light of the candle, he found Ron sitting on the bed closest to the door, with electricity flashing all over his body and blood flowing from the corners of his mouth. He was doing his daily self-mutilation exercise. However, the others were not much better. They were all wrapped in bandages and silently cleaning the dormitory. From time to time, they would twitch and twist stiffly like malfunctioning puppets. What happened here? Why is the gate gone? Hearing the sound, the recruits turned around in surprise. Navy hero, Iron Fist Garp? Why is he in the boot camp? As a lieutenant general of the headquarters, Garp had a high status and was busy. In the past, he rarely showed up even for the year-end evaluation of the recruit camp or the graduation assessment to decide the assignment. For a moment, the recruit's eyes were full of shock and admiration, staring at Garp blankly. But, this is also an opportunity. A group of people looked at each other and nodded. Lieutenant General Garp. Suddenly, the recruits rushed over excitedly, wanting to expose Ron's atrocities to Cap. But before that, the electric current in Ron's body bounced uncontrollably and hit the puddle on the floor. For a moment, blue light shone brightly and electric current surged. Sizzle sizzle. Noticing that everyone else was breakdancing, Ron opened his eyes and looked at them sincerely with an apologetic look. "Oh no. I'm sorry, everyone, I didn't mean it. God, this wasn't intentional. Do you think I'm blind?" Garp's mouth twitched suddenly, and he couldn't help but want to punch him. He already roughly understood what was going on. Decades ago, he, Zhangguo, and Zifa had gone through the same thing, fighting in the dormitory, and no one was willing to give in. He wanted to ask a few more questions, but considering the purpose of his trip, and in order to get Ron to cooperate a little, Cap simply pretended not to see it, and spoke to Ron under the desperate gaze of the recruits. "Come on, follow me out for a while." "Okay." A few minutes later, the two came to an open area. This is the platform behind the barracks for new recruits. From here you can overlook the sea, which encompasses most of the Navy headquarters. The scenery is magnificent. Of course, its value is not as an observation deck, but as a part of the dormitory area evacuation passage in an emergency. A few steps ahead at the corner leads to the underground port for refuge and escape. The legendary pirate Golden Lion Shiki's attack on the Navy headquarters left the Navy with a very profound lesson of blood and tears. On the platform, the two stood 10 meters apart. Garp took off his white cape and draped it over the tree trunk, stretching his arms and legs. "Come on, let me try out your new moves." His purpose was mentioned on the way. How did Ron manage to launch an attack with 4 times his physical strength? Garp wanted to test it himself. His purpose was just curiosity. Talent is the most unreasonable thing. Some people try their best all their lives but cannot get out of their own shackles and can only watch others go further and further away. Garp understood this truth deeply. "Hey, don't waste my training time, Vice Admiral Garp." Ron sighed helplessly. Garp is not Shuzo, even if he has the advantage of time, place, and people, there is no chance of winning. To put it bluntly, this fight is just to satisfy the curiosity of some old and disrespectful people. During the afternoon test, if it wasn't for the purpose of fully demonstrating his current level and making it easier for the instructor to make a targeted training plan for him, Ron would not have bothered to use that trick and attract the old bastard Cap. "Stop talking nonsense. I'll let you go back after the fight." Garp snorted coldly and waved his hand impatiently. "Come on or not? If not, I'll go first." "No. You should just stay where you are. I can't control the direction of this move. It's indeed an imperfect move." In response, Garp narrowed his eyes slightly. Ron is indeed gifted and has perseverance that ordinary people don't have, but he has only obtained the Thunder Fruit for more than a month, so he can only do so much. He had never shown any amazing moves on the ship before, such as using a 228 power attack. But when he came to the headquarters, he did it, which immediately attracted the attention of Zhangguo. This made Garp wonder whether Ron had deliberately shown weakness and concealed his incompetence in front of him before, so as to infiltrate the Navy, gain trust, and complete some unspeakable secrets. Cap is carefree, not stupid. Sometimes, people like him are the smartest. And he was the one who brought Ron into the Navy, and he had an inseparable responsibility for his every move, just like the departure of Dragon a few years ago. "If you ever stray, I'll pull you back." With a firm idea in mind, Cap tensed his muscles, ready to face Ron's powerful new move at any time. Chapter 19, Thunder Fist Goes to Jail. Ron didn't know what Cap was thinking, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. His purpose in joining the Navy was just to become stronger and surpass his limits. Other than that, he is even more Kizaru than Kizaru and completely indifferent. In fact, even if Garp didn't come tonight, Ron would ask the other instructors for advice when he started formal training tomorrow to perfect his moves. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. A cool sea breeze blew through the headquarters fortress, and the strands of hair in front of his eyebrows fluttered slowly. With his fists clenched, Ron slowly opened his stance and took a bow step forward. ZZ. Boom. Under the moonlight, a thumb-thick sky-blue lightning burst out from his skin, and the air exploded as it flashed. Cap keenly discovered that the lightning was not released intentionally by Ron. He had gathered all his strength in his body and locked it under his skin. Until now, it has become difficult to control. If it were an ordinary natural system, by now the right hand would have already been elementalized and transformed into dazzling lightning. The purpose of the natural system's elemental physique is not to allow them to bully others with elementalization, but to allow them to make better use of strength and make adaptive adjustments to the body. What does this guy want to do? Cap frowned slightly, and Ron's arm changed from flesh and blood to bright sky blue in a moment. Cloud-like spots of light shone from under the skin, and the skin became like a transparent film. A faint smell of burning odor was emitted. That's the burnt smell of flesh and blood. With this move, Ron's arm was actually roasted by the thunder. You! Cap was immediately horrified and opened his mouth to ask Ron to stop. He knew this little guy too well. For the sake of strength, he even developed a terrible method of training with lightning stimulation. It can be imagined that if he could use a move beyond the current physical limit, he would not hesitate even if he was disabled. An attack that is 4 times the body's strength is not only a talent, not only the advantage of the thunder fruit, but also the terrifying toughness and the monster-like indestructible will that will not give up until the goal is achieved. But it was too late now. Ron raised his head and said with a smile, "This move is even more powerful than when it was tested. Be careful, Vice Admiral Garp. Wait a moment." But the speed of sound was too slow, far slower than lightning. When Cap opened his mouth, Ron had already crossed dozens of meters in an instant and came to him at a speed that stunned him. That's the speed of lightning. At this moment, the thunder in his right hand was no longer restrained, and burst out violently, forming a dazzling electric ball, hitting his head. Overload 10 million volts Thunder Fist. ZZ. The dazzling sphere of lightning suddenly enlarged, covering Garp in a large area around him. The air was filled with an unsettling sense of danger, and the chirping of insects in the forest all stopped. 2 seconds later, the lightning suddenly shrank into a point, and then exploded violently. Boom, boom. The deafening and terrifying vibration awakened the entire Navy headquarters, and everyone was restless. It was a sound even louder than a cannon, coming from the mighty power of heaven, and it was unstoppable. When the thunder exploded, Zhang Guo opened his eyes in the back of the fortress, and walked to the window in his pajamas to look into the distance. After seeing the thunder rising from the sky, he was stunned for a second. Then, the corners of his mouth twitched wildly, and he gritted his teeth and spat out 2 names, Garp, Ron. At the same time, some people who knew the inside story looked out the window, each thinking about their own things. At the Science Force base, in Admiral Kizaru's room. Kizaru yawned, rubbed his eyes, and looked at the lightning in the distance. Is it thundering? It's so scary. Inside the recruit barracks and on the top of the building where Zifa is. Zifa took off his prosthetic limbs, his chest and arms were bare, and he only had a bath towel wrapped around his waist. Looking at the thunder and lightning in the distance, Zifa, who had just finished taking a bath, raised his lips slightly. You have courage. What a good little guy. Then he looked at the soldiers below who were lining up in a long line, picking up their weapons and heading to the scene, and his eyelids twitched. Tisk, but the law is unforgiving. On the platform behind the recruits' dormitory, the smoke and dust finally dissipated after a long time. The place had changed drastically by then, with the stone slabs collapsing and sunken, the trees charred and on fire, and the ground looked as if it had been hit by a bomb. The remaining electric current in the air would occasionally sway, and the crackling sound made Cap shrink his neck in fear. Whoosh, the night wind blows, and sparks fly. Cap slapped out the sparks that were growing larger on his hair, then held the unconscious Ron in his arms, speechless. "I'm so stupid, really." Knowing that Ron had just used this trick in the afternoon and nothing happened, she was still worried about his safety. If we hadn't been trying to control Ron to prevent him from suffering further damage, and neglected to protect the surroundings, such great damage would not have occurred. He understood Ron's move, which was still imitating Kizaru's light-speed kick. However, due to the huge gap, he could only cheat in disguise. He locked the powerful electric current in his arm, making his arm reach an overload state, and threw an explosive punch with the speed of lightning. Without accumulating inertia through elemental transformation, he directly transformed it into thunder with his physical strength. It was somewhat similar to the thunder and lightning training method he usually used, and it was probably evolved from it. I didn't hide the training from Garp, but Garp didn't expect that the simple training method could have such a wonderful application. And its power cannot be underestimated. You can tell this by looking at the surrounding environment. Only. You fell asleep easily, what should I do? Great now. Looking at the patrolling soldiers getting closer and closer, Cap changed his mind and threw Ron out, leaving him rolling on the ground like a salted fish. It wasn't me. It was him. Catch him now. The person in charge of the team was an old acquaintance, Vice Admiral Flying Squirrel of the Navy headquarters. Garp was overwhelmed with joy and shouted, "Vice Admiral Flying Squirrel! Hurry, take this guy to the prison before he wakes up." Vice Admiral Flying Squirrel, with a mohawk hairstyle that looked like a purple sweet potato, walked out of the team with a blank expression, holding the hilt of his sword. Upon hearing these words, he stumbled and almost fell to the ground. Then he restrained his expression and shouted angrily, "The Marshal has ordered. Take the prisoners Cap and Ron to the prison." Yes. The soldiers wanted to laugh but didn't dare to, and they were all red-faced and walked up with their guns. Cap was stunned for a moment, until the soldiers took out handcuffs and handcuffed him, then he jumped up and cursed. "Jean Guo, you bastard! I'm not done with you!" Clang! A cold light flashed, and the flying squirrel drew his sword expressionlessly, insulting the marshal as aggravated. "Hurry up and take him away. Garb. There are countless monsters and strong men in this world. Excluding this group of top combat forces, there are still many people who are capable of demolishing the headquarters fortress in the Navy headquarters alone. Powerful forces need to be restrained and rules need to be established, not to mention the Navy headquarters, which is already a solemn and sacred place. So it has nothing to do with the Golden Lion. Hundreds of years ago, the Navy established a rule: anyone who takes action in places where the headquarters is not allowed, without a legitimate reason, will be sent to prison for accountability, regardless of his or her position. The fight between the two of them tonight woke up the entire headquarters, and the impact was extremely bad. Not to mention Vice Admiral Garp, even the three admirals could not escape the fate of being imprisoned and sleeping on stone slabs. It's not that Garp doesn't know this rule, but in his eyes, no matter how powerful Ron's moves are, he can dissolve them invisibly and will not cause too much impact. This comes from his confidence in his strength at the top. However, just now, in order to control Ron, his attention was distracted and he had no time to consider the scope of the impact, which led to such a result. In the eyes of outsiders, the dignified naval hero, Iron Fist Garp, who personally captured the big shot of One Piece, the legendary naval evil spirit, was put in jail for the first time since he was born. This is really cause for celebration. Chapter 20, Probation and Naval Secrets. The next morning, Ron felt something was wrong with his body, so he turned over with his eyes closed. Then he fell on the stone slab with a bang. This woke him up immediately. He opened his eyes and looked at the cold ground. He recalled what happened last night and suddenly muttered, "That old bastard Carp, he's not going to just throw me on the ground and leave me alone, is he?" 2 overloaded lightning fists in one day, plus the exhausting battle with Shuzo, was a huge challenge for Ron. At the end of the fight, he was exhausted and passed out. "So, I just slept on the floor all night? You are vicious." Thinking viciously, Ron turned over and got up, but when he looked around clearly, he was confused. "Oh my god, what's going on? Where is this?" He was in a narrow cell less than 10 square meters. The only light came from the torches on the wall. There were dense steel cables all around, with grey stone strips in between. Not surprisingly, that thing was called sea stone. And Ron found that he was not outside the cell, but inside the cell. "I should be there, not here. This is the Navy headquarters prison, which is used to detain common criminals and pirates who were not sent to impel down." An old voice came from outside. Ron turned around and saw a purple-haired old man with a strong body and muscular body, as strong as Garp. He had the banner of justice on his shoulders and his hands on his chest. It is worth noting that his right hand was cut off at the shoulder, and now it was a wooden prosthesis. This person is the former Admiral of the Navy, current chief instructor of the new recruits camp, Black Arm Zephyr. Ron was only puzzled for a second at his appearance, and then his attention was drawn to another person. In another cell behind Zephyr, Cap was looking at him as if he were a mortal enemy, biting a donut as if to vent his anger. Ron was delighted at that time. "Hey, isn't this Vice Admiral Garp? You always come in to experience life." "Hiss." Suddenly, Garp gasped in shock at the pain in his tooth, but did not reply. Instead, he sneered and cracked his knuckles. Gordon's heart skipped a beat. Ron swallowed his saliva and gave up the idea of teasing Garp. Then he saluted and greeted Zifa, Chief Instructor Zifa. "Well, don't be nervous, just be casual." After moving a stool to sit on, Zifa lit a cigar, took a puff, and said to Ron across the cell, "Do you know why you were locked up?" Recalling what happened last night, Ron pinched his face and grinned foolishly. Ha, ha, I don't know what happened." "Stop playing dumb." Zifa's face suddenly darkened, and he roared, "It is the department's rule that unless it is an emergency, no one is allowed to take action in any unauthorized place. Anyone who violates this rule will be severely punished. There is such a rule." Ron looked at Zephyr in shock, and the expression on his face did not seem fake. Then, he widened his eyes and said to Garp in disbelief, "Vice Admiral Garp, you are plotting against me. He's lost his salary for this year." Zifa waved his hand to stop the quarrel that was about to break out between the two men, and then said, "Do you know what will happen to you?" "What will happen?" Garp was a vice admiral of the headquarters, a naval hero, and had a high status, but even he had his salary deducted for a year. "As a newcomer, I was afraid that I would have to kick me out of the Navy." Ron stared at Zephyr in horror and pointed at his nose. "No way! I just joined for one day." Seeing that Ron really knew the seriousness of the problem, Zifa's anger eased a little, and he snorted coldly and said, "That's right according to the rules. But you haven't been registered in our recruit list, so you're an outsider, and the Navy is not qualified to fire you. If you have never joined, there is naturally no such thing as expulsion." Ron breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. He never expected that the registration chores that he had always ignored would become the most important life-saving straw at this moment. "But..." Zifa changed the subject, causing Ron to stand up straight immediately. "Yes, I promise to complete the task." "Zifa, I haven't said anything yet." "You promise nothing." "And many more." "What did I just want to say?" The corners of his mouth twitched twice, and Zifa continued his interrupted thoughts. Considering that you are not aware of this, the Marshal has shown mercy and decided to keep you in the headquarters for observation. If you stop causing trouble and make amends, then the door of the Navy will still be open to you. Understand? After hearing this, Ron's eyes flashed and he began to think quickly. Yes, this is in line with reality. The Navy believes in the theory of nipping the danger in the bud. The reason why most of the pirates imprisoned in the Impel Down Forbidden Land LV.6 are not executed is not only to demonstrate their strength and deter pirates, but also because once their fruit abilities are spread and obtained by other pirates, the sea will be even more turbulent. If we expel a user of the Thunder Fruit from the Navy and release him back to the sea, if one day he decides not to become a pirate, the Navy will regret it deeply. Moreover, the Thunder Fruit is extremely powerful and is known as the strongest natural type. The problem this time is indeed very serious, but compared with the future of a user of the Thunder Fruit, the Navy can make concessions. As the saying goes, give and take, and each party gets what it needs. Grasping the key point, Ron put aside his anxiety and replied with a smile, "Understood." Ron left soon. Since the decision had been made to put him on probation, there was no point in detaining a civilian. After Ron was sent away, Garp sat in the cell and looked at Zephyr. "That boy's body, you also discovered it, right?" "Yeah, that kind of self-healing ability is simply not like that of a human." Zifa took a puff of his cigar and recalled what he had witnessed last night. Upon hearing that Ron's arm had been burned while developing a new move, Zifa rushed over with a medical team of dozens of people, fearing that Ron's arm would be disabled like himself. But before the doctor could confirm the diagnosis, under the stunned gaze of the crowd, the charred blood shells fell off in an instant, revealing the new pink muscles and skin underneath. Afterwards, the colonel who was in charge of the test in the afternoon was quickly summoned for questioning. After confirming that Ron had used the same move in the afternoon, although the power was not as strong as at night, it also caused serious damage to the body. Cap and others believed the fact. Ron was born with amazing healing abilities, it has nothing to do with his Thunder Fruit. In the afternoon, the colonel instructor in charge of the test thought that Ron's injuries were not serious, and that he had indeed recovered after a short while, so he thought that there was nothing serious, and therefore did not report it separately. But they are different from others, they stand higher and see more clearly. Therefore, it can be directly concluded that Ron's body is different from that of ordinary people. And his body is a black hole. Why is that? Zifa smoked more frequently, and the air was filled with smoke. Last night, after confirming that Ron was fine, the doctor prepared some nutrient solution and transfused it into Ron to supplement his missing nutrients. But as soon as those things entered his blood vessels, Ron's muscles all over his body spasmed, and he digested and absorbed them in the blink of an eye. After trying several times, Ron's aura recovered and strengthened at a speed visible to the naked eye. If his aura strength was 10 after the injury, then it became 11 at that time, in just half an hour. It was not until he burped unconsciously that his body stopped absorbing like a black hole and returned to normal. This can no longer be explained by excellence and genius, he is a monster. What Ron didn't know was that even though the nutrients in the food in the One Piece world were extremely easy to absorb, they were still restricted by the body. His unreasonable and unlimited absorption and devouring caused him to grow at an astonishing speed. He is simply an outlier. To make an analogy, others' bodies were unable to hold more energy and were then blown up, broken and then rebuilt, thus breaking through the original upper limit. But he seemed to be born with no upper limit and could always turn nutrition into nutrients. This ability reminded Garp of something that happened decades ago. He fell from the sky. The Thunder Fruit came from a sky island kingdom called Baika. On the ship, Garp asked about Ron's past. A traveling adventurer, this was the identity Ron arranged for himself. Later, a backwash occurred, and he and his ship were washed ashore on the Sky Island. After several years of wandering, he finally got the Thunder Fruit, but when testing his ability, he accidentally fell into Qinghai. There are very few cases of backwash currents in this book, but they do exist. Most of the time, they are not recorded and are spread among the people, so there is no way to verify when Ron was washed ashore on the Sky Island. Is it that kingdom called Bika again? Zifa frowned silently, apparently remembering something as well. But even if it's that thing, the effect is a bit too exaggerated, isn't it? As one of the insiders, Zifa has a close relationship with Garp. He has regretted more than once why it was Garp who ate the fruit without fear of death instead of himself. But even if it was that kind of fruit, Garp was not so perverted back then. I don't know about that. Cap bit into his donut and shrugged. Didn't that Birdman say that the effects of the drugs can be added together? He also wanted to use this to trick us into going to Sky Island to avenge him. So maybe Ron foolishly ate a lot of it. But at the moment, the kid hasn't discovered his own specialness. I guess he doesn't even know what he ate. At this point, Carp was trying not to laugh. After all, his body is different from that of an ordinary person. Maybe he feels good about himself and thinks everything is normal. Ha ha ha, so that's it. Zifar raised his lip when he heard that. He flicked his cigar, watched the sparks and ashes drifting in the air, and smiled slowly. If the effects of the drugs can really be superimposed, then Ron's training needs to be adjusted specifically. A year's worth of effective drug power cannot be wasted. In response to this, Garp rarely took a serious look and looked at Zephyr seriously. Then, I'll leave everything up to you, Zephyr. Nonsense. Stop worrying about other people's business and go to jail. Zifa sneered, swung his big flag, and strode out. End of this chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.